Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Blind Press YouTube channel. And it's finally time for the freaking debate. Yay! Functional is running a bit late. Hopefully he'll be along in a moment, because it just wouldn't be the same without having Dr. Functional along with us this evening. But that's why we're starting at 8:30 and not 9 o'clock. Ha ha ha, smart us. So, let's just kind of let some people trickle in here. And hopefully Functional will be joining us in a moment. Gunfox is in chat. Costin is in chat. Hello, my wonderful friends. I hope everyone is well. Let's put out one final Twitter notification here. Okay. Here we go. Okay. There we go. That's been shared. Twitter gets closed. Here we are. That gets reopened. Okay. Doing things on the fly. Isn't it wonderful? All right. Yeah. That bothers me. Hello, the original Shroom. Hello, Mr. Goatman. Yes, it is very frustrating that the Bloc Québécois gets to be in the national discussion, yet the People's Party of Canada, regardless of what you think of their platform, they're a national party. They have their names on they have a spot on the ballot. They should be there. No, you can't send Joe up to us. No. Now, while we're waiting for Mr. Functional, I'm going to quickly I'm quickly going to send him a Discord message. Is you alive? There we go. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, participation in the leadership debate should be based on the number of candidates running. So, if you want to let's get this going here. So, right here beside me is this big bottle of orange juice. Going with that orange juice is going to be this Bacardi, because vodka and orange juice, meh. Rum and orange juice, yum. And just to make things interesting, $100 donation gets me to drink this entire bottle, this entire skull, at once. Like a shot. So, and I also don't have a shot glass, so I'm just going to be guesstimating how much rum I'm pouring in my orange juice. So this is going to be a really fun debate. So, if you want me to read all of your donations out without, editing them, this is probably going to be your night. because I will be drunk. Okay. Where's my orange juice? There's my orange juice. Now, there are only 4 candidates running in your riding? That sucks, Costin. Where's the lid? There's the lid. Not nearly enough rum in there. Let's fix that. That's better. Now there's enough rum in that. Okay. What is chat saying? Even worse, I want to vote for the... Hello. Oh. A bucket. A bucket. Oh my. Let's see. Pink Hollow will be carrying you to bed. Greetings. Eluin! Go! Are you near functional and you can go see what's going on with him? Or are you not at the apartment right now? Yep. Much better tasting than vodka and orange juice. Yeah. When my kids said that it was weird to have a blind mom. Yeah, that was funny. Not at the apartment, just had surgery. Oh, okay. Let's see. Well, you know what? I'm going to grab the link for the debate. And we're going to get that screen shared. Yes, copy link, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. Don't die, baby. I'll try. Okay, where am I here? There we go. I wonder if I should give him a Discord call. Let's see. Yeah, I wonder if I should give him a Discord call. Okay, let's open this tab.
Hey, why don't you just go over some of the news articles or, start the stream because you're just...
That's what I'm doing.
Okay, because you guys just sitting there.
That's what I'm... Okay, come on, Twitter. Load. Load. Load, you son of a... Okay, thank you. Direct messages. Yes, please. Okay. Oh, too far. Too far. Too far. There we go. Okay. Okay, let's get this loaded up. If there's anything playing, at least it'll be pre-stuff. I'm not sure if they've... Yep. They've got a pre-show going on here. Let's see here. Yeah, they have a pre-show, like a chat, like a pre-show chat going here. There we go. Share, please. Yeah, it's just like different political people speaking on their predictions. Here we go.
Last night, Mr. O'Toole was on the defensive on many issues, including the daycare services and the gun control. And Mr. Trudeau will want to, I guess, keep hitting those nails because they've been showing some signs of life in the polls for the Liberal Party.
John, let me hear your thoughts on last night and whether that might influence what we see tonight.
Well, my thought on last night was that I tweeted out that if you want to experience being semi-comatose without drinking a bottle of scotch, then watch this debate because it was urgent. As Susan and JD have pointed out, it was only when they did go fast that it actually livened up a bit. And I think we're going to see. It's kind of weird that Erin O'Toole is playing a frontrunner's campaign. He's being defensive and really not risking too much, and it's Justin Trudeau who's really getting out there, looking like he's more eager to take power. Although obviously he has power at the moment, but I think we'll see more of that where he attacks O'Toole. He essentially repeated it. The one memorable attack that he had, in my opinion, was when he attacked O'Toole, essentially repeating the attack ad that they released on taking back Canada from last weekend.
Susan, with Liberals and Conservatives deadlocked in the polls here, we clearly have a tight race, and this debate, I suppose, tonight could be an opportunity to break the deadlock. So do you see that happening tonight? And if it's going to happen, how does it happen?
Well, it's going to happen, I think, with all respect to JD, I think last night was for the Trudeau-Blanchette face-off, but I think tonight is going to be for the Trudeau-O'Toole face-off. And I don't rule out that there's going to be some action between Trudeau and Singh as well. Remember that tonight's audience there's going to be a huge amount from Ontario, and Ontario is where a lot of this campaign is going to be fought. British Columbia as well. So it's going to get very different debate, I think, with Trudeau trying to take away people, get back people who may have been drifting over to Conservatives or to the New Democrats.
And I don't get copyright strikes
and O'Toole from them, and Singh trying their best to keep those voters in their own camps, if not get more.
I think what's always interesting to watch in these debates, and we've all expressed over time through different debates what formats work and what formats don't work. But two things happen in these debates, right? The format drags along the leaders, or at some point the leaders can drag along the format if they choose to do that. And I'm wondering if we'll see that tonight in this context. The Quebec Premier, Joël Denis, François Legault, came out today and said, the Liberals, New Democrats, and Greens hold what he called dangerous views on issues important to Quebec on healthcare and immigration. He gave sort of mixed reviews to Erin O'Toole. He likes the pledge to stay out of provincial jurisdiction from the Tories, but doesn't like the fact that O'Toole will cancel the federal childcare transfers to Quebec. So he didn't explicitly endorse the Conservatives or the Bloc, but he seemed to explicitly condemn the other three parties. So I'm wondering if Erin O'Toole takes the opportunity, and if not him, perhaps Yves-François Blanchet, does that somehow get injected into the debate tonight, and how do you think it plays out?
I think it will. It did that last week during the face-à-face on TVA. Mr. O'Toole mentioned Mr. François Legault's name at least a dozen times, and I expect Mr. O'Toole to use
hopefully he's all right.
Mr. Trudeau, Mr. Legault said today
he's not
to his own advantage.
Having a bad
Mr.
pain
Legault
day or something.
went a little bit further by saying that he would hope that the election would produce a Tory minority government. And I've already received some emails from Tory strategists, meaning, what does that mean for us in Quebec? Or they believe that this might be proven a gift from the sky that they can use to build some momentum in the last week of the campaign.
John, I think we expect the Bloc leader will want to hammer Justin Trudeau with François Legault's comments today. But I guess, should Erin O'Toole look to embrace the mixed reviews from Legault about the Conservatives, or is there a risk in that?
These people
I think,
are very boring.
It's strange to me that they
We're
went with
going
this
to
daycare.
meet them, and we'll check back in closer to the time. We'll just let them sit in the background. So, it's very interesting to me that, so the Green Party, neither the Green Party nor the People's Party of Canada were invited to either French debate. And I believe just the Green Party has been invited to tonight's debate. And I find that very, very strange, and I don't like it. I don't find either party's platform particularly appealing, but I also feel that if they're on the ballot, that they have an absolute right to be at the debate, so that Canadians can hear their platform and their ideas. I don't think that it's right at all that those parties be excluded. And I especially don't find it right that specifically the PPC has been excluded from tonight's debate. Again, I don't really like a lot of what Maxime Vernier does. Like, I like that he, calls everybody out, but I don't like a lot of his platform. I don't think a lot of it's been thought through very well, and I also feel like he kind of just is he's very unpredictable, because he bounced from the Bloc Québécois to the Liberals to the Conservatives, and it is just, I don't quite understand where his politics really lie. Was Amy Paul not invited, or did she decide not to attend the French language debate? I don't think she was invited. I honestly don't think she was invited. I could be wrong. Oh, no, they definitely have more than... the Green Party have seats in the House of Commons, Gun Fox, and I think the People's Party may I don't know if they have any seats. So that might be why they weren't invited, but the Green Party definitely should have been invited to all debates. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, these the political pundits and stuff, the guys that CPAC have to interview, they're kind of they're very dry. Like if you listen,
the far larger group of switchers, far larger than Liberal Conservative switchers, is the Liberal NDP switchers. I mean, I saw there was an Abacus poll last week that said it's almost 1 in 5 voters. So
yeah, that's a scary.
The key to this election
thing that really worries me are the Liberal voters that are.
If you kind of divide them half,
switching
50-50,
but not switching to Conservative, they're
half of those voters,
NDP.
And he plateaus. Even if he plateaus at 20% where he is now, that's an awful lot more seats.
Really do not need an MDP.
Okay, just very quick comments here. We got about a minute and a half left total. So
scary.
Susan, talk to me about the challenge for Annemie Paul. She was in the French language debate last night.
I know you're just saying what the U.S. does. I'm just trying to compare.
Second chance tonight. What's she up against?
With what
she should. She had one good moment, or maybe several, but I think one that the women I know were talking about, which was, wait a minute, I'm the only woman on stage. I'm more qualified to speak about childcare than all of you, and I think if she,
it would be cool to see
plays that card, I think that could be interesting too, because she is a different presence there. She is the first woman of color to be on that stage. So
who cares if she's the? Oh my God!
She has to offer.
Who cares what color she is? Is she a good representative?
If she can't do that, then the writing is on the wall for.
If I'm yelling at the pre-debate show, this is going to be amazing.
The Green Party only holds 2 seats now, so the Green Party might lose one of the 2 seats. So she has to be able to tell her message, come across as.
And remember, guys, if you any donations you guys make,
okay, John, let's finish with you and the challenge for Annemie Paul.
Putting away.
Yeah, I thought she actually had a reasonable debate last night. She offered a human face to.
Real quick, I'm going to put pretty much the donations that come in right now are going to go towards a monitor for the new computer, because while I'll be approved for a computer, I will not be approved for a monitor. So any donations that come in basically between now and like November, December, that time, are going to be going to like the monitor, and anything else that I may have to get, like if I have to get something. I hope I don't think I have to, but just that's the plan. Just so you guys are aware where your donations are going. We're going to have to get a monitor so that Pincalo can assist me with OBS and stuff, because it will be a little difficult for him to use a computer without a screen.
Susan, let me start with you. It's been a day of more preparation, I'm sure. What do they need to be thinking right now, 5 minutes to air?
Well, they need to take a deep breath. They need to focus on their 3 key messages, what they want the tone they expect to have with Canadians, and who they want to land them with. I'm just looking at the lineup and who's beside whom. It's different than last night, and that's going to be interesting as well. It means Mr. Trudeau will be talking across Mr. Singh to get to Mr. O'Toole. Mr. Trudeau will also potentially have his back to Ms. Paul occasionally, and I hope nobody has an unruly reaction to that. I mean, when you spar with your opponent, you face your opponent.
There he is.
So that'll be interesting. But key messaging: keep your cool, take a deep breath, connect with Canadians.
Kate, we're looking right now.
Wait,
we see the Conservative leader, Erin O'Toole, scribbling notes. I think Justin Trudeau's either reading or doing the same. What's Erin O'Toole doing?
Probably working on the elevator pitch and just kind of getting reacquainted with his key messages. I agree with Susan. Typically, you have your 3 points that you really want to get across in the first 30 seconds. There's a lot of attention being held on TV tonight. It's NFL kickoff. There's a big tennis women's tournament. So people might only tune in for the first 5-10 minutes of this thing. So your opening statement really matters. Your elevator pitch really matters. Very few, except
Hello.
those political nerds, will be
How are
hanging
you?
on
No surprise.
until the bitter end of this thing.
There's nothing wrong with being a political nerd.
It's
Just
all
put that on the
good.
record. The person who
figured
seems
that's
less
what happened.
obsessed
That's
with
why
the
I,
moment
like,
right now, if you're
rang your
watching,
Discord,
is the
'cause I
bloc leader,
figured,
Francois
like,
Blanchet. He's kind of walking around the podium.
Oh yeah, Elwin
He
was
probably
calling
passed
my
out.
phone, and I woke
But,
up. I was like, "Oh damn,
it's
it's
a
already
different
like
kettle of fish
10
for
to 9.
him. The English debate on a couple of, on a couple of
It's
points.
just the
It is the English language debate, and
pre-show.
you really want to do well
Yeah,
in
the
both the
preamble
French
from the
debates
idiot
and
from the
also,
media,
Yeah.
he's the one candidate in the race, the one one leader,
Remember
a
that-
party leader who can't aspire
What's
to
her
form.
name? The one that was just talking. I think they need to take a deep breath.
Oh god, yeah.
I hate her. I hate her.
They're all
BBC
super
reporter.
dry. Like, they're all really, really dry when they speak. They're just like, this is what I think about what's going to happen. Like, they have no...
Soul.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's Canadian media. Kim Wright. That's it. Hate her. Oh, of course she's an an NDP ginger. Who's all here? We got Costin, Elwin, Gun Fox, Seamus, Toss. Hey guys.
Sadly, this debate will be meaningless to me since none of these candidates are... Yeah, none of these people...
Same. Last polls had PPC at +10.
Yeah.
+10. But again, polling is useless.
My goodness, it
Excuse me.
sounds like a zoo is happening up there.
Where?
In my home.
Oh. We call corralling the kitties.
Yeah. I told them both. I'm like, you go to sleep for dad. And they're like, okay. I'm like, uh-oh. Oh, no. I should move to Canada, take over, and turn it into a freedom place. Oh, boy. That doesn't sound very freedom-like. All right, what's
20% of the electorate. Almost half of them
God,
say they
this
haven't
guy's a
fully made up their
fucking
mind.
child.
What unites them is
He
their
sounds
preference
like
for
a
a liberal
child.
government over a conservative one, but they also agree
He looks like he's
that
12 and
climate
wearing a
change,
suit.
Indigenous reconciliation, inequality are all things they want whatever government comes out of this to focus on. So for Mr. Singh, it's how do you keep them in the NDP camp? For Mr. Trudeau, it's trying to
we don't.
demonstrate that, Mr. O'Toole is not the outcome that they want as Prime Minister, and
We
so
want
they should
someone
come
to
the
stop
Liberals.
printing money,
I think a
corral
lot of this
inflation,
election is going to hinge on where that group goes, and
stimulate
a
the
big fight tonight is
economy,
gonna be on,
stimulate
can
housing.
Mr. Trudeau make Mr. O'Toole scary enough to get those New Democrats to come over?
No.
Can Mr. Singh disappoint progressives enough in Mr. Trudeau that they stay with Mr. Singh? And can Mr. O'Toole rebuff that attack and make himself an acceptable alternative for not just those who might vote for him, but for the New Democrat voters to stick with them?
It's interesting to run through the dynamics of what's at play here to try and make all of that happen. It's there's clearly a lot more involved than this. People show up and vote on voting day. It's all about the messaging in the last
All about the
10
messaging.
days.
all about the message.
Advance polls open tomorrow in this country. So Susan, Kate, Kim, stand by for us and enjoy the debate, and we'll be back after the debate. Same
Oh
to you,
yes,
David
enjoy
Coletto.
the debate.
There will be lots to talk
oh
about. We'll
boy,
see how
this'll
all of
be
this
interesting.
unfolds.
Lots to be
It's a
talking-
very
lots to
important
talk
night, and We'll
about.
see how the
You
leaders
did it again.
treat it. The English language leaders debate coming up next, right here on CPAC.
English language.
There we
How about
go.
just normal?
Yep.
You had an option, sir. You could have said, I am not going to do it.
This was just scattering money around to build gazebos and fake lakes.
The one you bought, you can't build.
You try to open up the treaty, you can lose everything.
And don't try to paper over what's happening in people's lives.
It's still time for a change.
We had to take over the mess that you left us.
It's not economically disastrous. It's a smart economic thing to do.
And an agreement between Quebec
God,
and Canada.
the history of our
It's very
debates is so awful.
Yep.
Most of those people are just...
Remember, people, $100 donation gets me to drink this.
Is that a crystal skull?
Yep.
Oh, Jesus.
Live from Gatineau, Quebec,
Oh,
this is the 2021 Federal Leaders Debate. We're coming to you from the Grand Hall in the Canadian Museum of History on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people.
Then give
a
it
place for Canadians to reflect on the country's past. But tonight, we are looking ahead
They
to the
lost.
future.
Get over it.
Good evening, I'm Shachi Curl. I'm the
People
president of the Angus Reid
lose.
Institute, and tonight I will be your moderator. Let's welcome the party leaders.
She's the
Justin
moderator?
Trudeau for the Liberal Party.
Oh boy.
Aaron O'Toole for the Conservative Party. Yves-François Blanchette of the Bloc Québécois.
Pleasure.
Jagmeet Singh of the NDP. And
He's the only one
Anne
not
Hall
smiling.
for the Greens. Welcome, leaders. Good evening.
And she's just got resting
Tonight's
bitch face.
event is being produced for the Leaders Debates Commission by a media
At
partnership.
least Yves
including
Francois like
NPTN
cracked a little bit of a
News,
smile when he
CBC
said, I'll be
News,
info.
CTV News, and Global News. The debate is also offered in 10 other languages, including Cree,
Oh my
Inuktitut,
God,
Dene,
shut
as well
up.
as described video and ASL.
Described
20,000
video.
Canadians have weighed in telling us what they want to hear from
Mr. Singh adjusts
and
his
5 themes
turban.
have emerged. Leadership and
Justin
accountability,
Trudeau is looking smashing
climate
in
change,
his
reconciliation,
Doctor Who
affordability,
socks.
and COVID recovery.
Oh.
Tonight, 4 undecided voters, and
4
journalists, maybe
undecided
the journalists are undecided
journalists?
as well, will be putting their questions directly to the leaders. And you leaders, you've agreed to tonight's
Why are
rules
any
and
journalists
format.
asking
So,
any
before
questions?
we begin, please
I can't believe she made that
answer the
Freudian
questions
slip.
you're asked. Do not interrupt each other.
Answer
I don't
the
wanna cut you
questions
off,
you're
but I will if I
asked.
have to. Okay? All right, let's get started.
Sucks.
I love that she said that though.
You will each get
Yeah.
a different question, and you have 45 seconds to answer. You all have a countdown clock. The theme is leadership and accountability. Your speaking order has been determined
Oh,
by
hey,
draw.
Goatman.
And Mr. Singh, you are first. Hi,
Oh,
Mr. Singh.
good.
Hi there.
Mr. Singh, you are popular and you inspire many Canadians, but your platform is full of big promises. And when it comes to how you'll pay for it all, there's not a lot of details. Given this, how can Canadians know?
Here's
that
the
you
hint.
are really
They'll
ready
steal
to
your money.
I really appreciate the question, and I want to say good evening to everyone tuning in. There is a serious question that people are asking themselves in this election. They're wondering who's going to pay the price of this pandemic and the recovery. And we do have bold plans about how we can invest in people. But we are the only party with a credible plan that will not put the burden on people, that will not cut the help that they need, unlike Mr. Trudeau and Mr. O'Toole, who voted against making the ultra-rich pay their fair share. We believe that billionaires should
the
pay their fair
ultra-rich
share.
aren't people?
We should end the loopholes and the offshore
I
tax
mean,
havens that
he
mean
kind of let the
billions
mask
of
slip
dollars
right
are
there.
lost
He
when
doesn't
we are not
believe
able
that
to invest in people. We
the
want
quote-unquote
to put the burden on
ultra-rich
those
are
that at
people.
the very, very top, so we can
That's
invest in
super
the solutions that
communist.
people need. Tackling the climate crisis, investing in housing.
Well, that's
All
what
right,
he
thank
is.
you, Mr. Singh.
He's a
Next
communist
to you, Mr. Trudeau.
terrorist
Because
sympathizer,
you
so,
wanted a new mandate,
I hear
you
a
plunged the country into an
insane
election
4-year-old
even as the pandemic spurs
closer.
thousands of new cases. But over the last 18 months, opposition parties have largely stood with you, putting the nation above politics. Why aren't you doing the same? How can you justify an election at this time?
Thank you, Ms. Curl. I think, first of all, I want to thank Canadians for being here tonight and making an important choice, and also, quite frankly, for everything you've done.
If I may offer a wrestling chant, you suck! You
Over the
suck.
next couple of hours, you're going to hear some very, very different, very strong ideas that are radically different about how we're going to move forward through this pandemic to end it. How
Radically
we're gonna build
different?
back
As far as
decisions are gonna
I
be
know,
taken
you
by
didn't
your
let him
government
come on
now,
stage.
in the coming
Dickbag.
weeks, this fall, not a year from now, not 2 years from now.
Could it not
And
have
I know
waited a
you
few
want
months,
to go-
Mr. Trudeau?
I know you want to go harder and faster on vaccinations. I know you want to go harder and faster on climate change.
Wow,
and
he's
you get to
ignoring
choose
her
exactly
straight
that
up.
in this election.
All right, that's time. Thank you. Mr. Blanchet,
He ignored
to
the
you.
question. He ignored
You
her.
deny that
And
Quebec has
no, that's
problems
not
with
what Canadians
racism,
want.
yet you defend
The
legislation
Canadians
such
who
as
wanted
Bills
vaccinations
96
got
and 21,
vaccinated.
which
The
marginalize
ones who don't
religious
are
minorities,
protesting like
Anglophones,
crazy.
and
I'm going to one
allophones.
on Monday
Quebec is
at Parliament
recognized
Hill.
as a distinct society,
Oh,
but
see,
for
you're
those
going to one at
outside
the
the
proper
province,
place,
please help them
not at a
understand why
fucking
your
hospital.
party also supports these discriminatory laws.
The question seems to imply the answer you want. Those laws are not about discrimination. They are about the values of Quebec.
And
Which
yet
is about
religious minorities,
discrimination.
sir, cannot progress if they wear their religious gear.
Quebec is not recognized as a distinct society. It's been recognized as a nation on June 16th by the Parliament. 281 votes said that Quebec is a nation, and everybody here seems to agree with that. No more distinct
Then
society,
fuck
which
off.
never had any meaning anyway. Meaning, not meeting.
So again, why the discriminatory laws and your support for it, sir?
You may repeat as many times as you want that those are discriminatory laws. We are saying that those are legitimate laws that apply on Quebec territory, and there seems to be people around here who will share this point of view, which is a gain by itself for Quebec.
This
right,
is
thank you,
why
Mr.
the
Mr.
separatists
Blanchet.
are
Ms.
such
Paul, to you,
assholes.
for millions of
I
voters,
don't
this
care what you
is the
say. We
climate
are an
change
independent
election.
nation
But
within
at this
Canada.
critical time, you've been bogged down
Piss
in
off.
internal strife. If your own party doesn't fully support you, how can Canadians trust you to lead through one of the most defining issues of our times?
It's a black, and I'm a
It's
woman,
an excellent question,
and I'm a Jew.
it's an honor to be here tonight on the unceded territories of the Algonquin peoples. It has been a very difficult period, and do I wish that our party had been further ahead, particularly at this moment? Absolutely. Do I believe that we have wonderful candidates running all over the country that you should consider voting for? Absolutely. Being who I am and in this position has been incredibly hard. Being here tonight was not an obvious thing. I've had to crawl over a lot of broken glass to get here.
Oh, you
I'm proud to be
poor
here.
dear.
I'm proud to be the first of my kind, and because I am the first of my kind, I know that I won't be the last.
Thank you, Ms. Paul.
See,
And to you,
identity
Mr.
politics,
O'Toole.
that's all
Mr.
they
O'Toole, you
have.
recommend vaccinations, but you won't make your candidates get them. You have a climate plan, but you won't dump a candidate that shares climate conspiracies. You're on record supporting the LGBTQ2 community, but you allowed half your MPs to vote against legislation protecting them. Tell me, how can voters
Protecting them
trust
from
that
what?
it's you
What
and not your
rules,
caucus
what
that will
laws
be
are in
charge
place
of the
that do not
conservative
protect?
policy agenda?
Apparently, the
Well, thank you,
thing
Ms.
is,
Curl. I'm a new leader of the Conservative Party.
real quick, the thing is that the lie that's being told is that conservatives want to repeal a ban on conversion therapy.
We have a plan to get the country back on its feet after a difficult 18
Just
months
like
in
I
this
think
crisis.
she
I'm
just
a
reiterated a
pro-choice
law saying that
ally
they.
to the LGBTQ
Oh well,
community
not
that
a
comes
law,
from
but
my service
the notion
in the
that
military, where
he will
I
not-
served
I'll let him
alongside
speak.
people from all backgrounds, all orientations, putting the country first. And our platform, including a detailed plan on climate change, is about
Circling
making
victim,
sure
circling
we secure
please
the
race
future.
card. Yep.
Jobs, accountability, national leadership
So
on
is it
mental
you,
health.
sir, or your caucus
Oh,
that's
blah blah
driving the
blah.
bus?
But saying that they're not going to
we get this
enforce
country back on
vaccine
track. And I'm here
passports.
to
Yeah.
defend
There's
the
liberal
rights of
attack
all
ads that say
Canadians,
as much.
women, members
And
of
that's
the
not true.
LGBTQ
O'Toole
community,
wants vaccine
Indigenous
passports.
Canadians. I want to make sure we all secure a future together.
The only person
Thank you, Mr.
who's
O'Toole.
not going to
All right,
outright
leaders, thank you. It is now time
institute
for our first face-to-face debate.
vaccine
Mr. Trudeau,
national
Ms.
vaccine
Paul, you're
passport
up,
program
starting with Mr.
is Trudeau.
based on
Instead,
this
Trudeau's going to
question.
pay the provinces
You call
$1 billion
yourself a
to do it
feminist,
themselves.
But on your watch, sexual misconduct in Canada's armed forces continues to run rampant. Tell me, why are you allowing these unacceptable conditions to continue?
I think we recognize that
90% of them were found to be uncredible.
The country, and that's why, from the very beginning, we stepped up with policies, new policies, stronger policies and processes.
What about your sexual harassment scandal there, Trudeau?
Said stepped up,
deserves
take a
to work in a
drink.
workplace where they are being discriminated against, where they are being harassed or hassled. We have been unequivocal about that. My leadership has been unequivocal about that. Yes, these problems continue in workplaces across the country, particularly in the military. That's unacceptable, which is why we've taken even stronger measures. It's unsatisfactory to have to say we're relying on process in this. We want to just be able to have easy answers.
Ms.
But
Paul,
this is
what's
not
your
an
response
issue
to that?
with easy answers. You have to fall back on process.
Jesus, dude.
I have said before, and I'll say again tonight, that I do not believe that Mr. Trudeau is a real feminist. A feminist doesn't continue to push strong women out of his party when they are just seeking to
she's
serve.
not wrong there.
And I will say their names tonight and thank them. Thank you, Jane Philpott.
Oh, come on.
Thank you, Jody Wilson-Raybould.
That's a little.
Thank you, Selena Cesar-Chavez. And I'm here tonight thanks to the work that you
Because
have done.
she's scum. She's a vapid piece
Wait
of
a
crap.
minute.
Wait, and in previous years.
She
that we,
didn't
in
thank the native girl, the native from MP from the Nunavut region.
Would have better laws in our military.
Nice.
We would have childcare at this point. We would have many of the things that we need. I am the only woman other than Elizabeth May to be on this platform in the last 18 years. The Liberal Party has never had a woman lead it. I think it's time for the party to examine its priorities.
Ms. Hall, you'll perhaps understand that I won't take lessons on caucus management from you.
And I
think what I will keep focused on is making sure that our first woman finance minister has moved forward on
all right, Mr. Trudeau.
Mr.
Trudeau, I'm sorry, that's time. We have to move on. Mr. Blanchet, Mr. O'Toole, and Mr. Singh, this next topic is for you to debate. Canada's transition to a green economy depends on pipelines. At a time when Ontario and Quebec face uncertain energy supply over Line 5, this country cannot extract nor distribute oil domestically. Our theme is leadership. Tell me, which one of you is best to lead on these complex issues? Mr. Blanchet, per the draw, you begin.
I'm not very much interested in leading Canada. However, I am very much interested in making sure that Quebec is
entitled at least he's fucking honest about
its
it.
own vision for the future. You know, in Quebec, we do not.
It infuriates me that him and
we are lucky.
and Elise are even on this stage.
Green energy
had no place there.
Large amount, but the whole planet cannot afford.
But they needed a token
this very
Frenchie and a
Canadian
token
idea, this very
whatever
conservative
she is.
idea, and as far as I know, this very liberal
I'm
idea
confused at
that
this
we have
point,
to
'cause she
produce
claims to
more
be like
oil,
8 different
export
things.
more oil, believing that the money from it will reduce gas emission, which won't happen.
All Canadian families deserve an economic recovery, including families in Western Canada that feel left out after 6 years of Mr. Trudeau. When it comes to leadership, our natural resources sector is a leader in environmental social governance. Anytime Canadian resources are removed from the global supply chain, you know who fills that gap? Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Russia. All of these organizations and companies are getting their emissions down. Let's get emissions down and Canadian resources to market so that we can have jobs opportunity and fight climate change.
Mr. Singh.
When it comes to leadership on
Why don't you shut up and wait your turn?
This essential crisis, one of the biggest crises we're up against. We've got a difficult choice for Canadians. You've got on one side someone who doesn't believe there's a crisis, and then on the other you got Mr. Trudeau.
Where has he said he doesn't believe it?
And what it's going to take is
He
real
just
leadership.
said we should get
Because the
emissions
solutions
down.
are there. We can invest in
Why
green
would
energy,
he say
clean
that if he
energy.
didn't
We
believe
can
there was
invest
a
in
crisis?
renewable
He
energy.
doesn't give up on
We can
tens of thousands of workers
We'll
across
never
the
give up
country.
on workers. We're a
workers that
party-
are working hard
But
for their
Mr. Trudeau,
families, so we can get our resources to market.
Okay, one at a time, gentlemen. Mr. O'Toole, then back to you, Mr. Singh. Mr. O'Toole,
I
then
want
Mr.
to
Singh.
see Canadians get back to work in all sectors and in all regions. And I'm proud of what we produce in our country, whether it's our resources or the resources in the heads of our young people.
But
we
these workers
to
need
get
a plan.
emissions down
Mr. Toole,
and get our
these
energy to
workers
market.
these workers need a plan that's going to create jobs for the future, and that's a responsibility of government. We've seen 6 years of Mr.
Your
Trudeau,
government
and workers
do
can't
not
afford
control
another
jobs.
4 years. What we need to do is
Fucking
invest in a
communist.
diversified economy, clean energy. We need to electrify
I
transportation.
hate those talking
we need to
points.
invest in retrofitting homes and buildings. We need to
have an
create good
incredible
jobs for
innovation
workers
plan,
now.
but
Turning
we
into
need
a tomato there,
economic
PP.
recovery in all
That
sectors.
was a good toke.
Last word to you,
and
Mr.
Mr. Singh.
Blanchet. Last word to you, sir.
Leadership is not only saying the words, it's proposing solutions, admitting a problem, which they're not doing.
All right, thank you. My next question is for all of you. We've had some encouraging
he on
news
drugs?
out of Kabul overnight with
Excuse
the
me.
escape of
Maybe.
43 Canadians. That said, thousands of people who helped Canada during Canada's mission in Afghanistan have been left behind in their hour of need, and it is unknown if we will ever get them all out. To each of you, what would you have done differently?
God, I wish I was
Stuart,
on that
where the
stage
draw
right
you
now.
began.
Canada should never leave behind people that are at risk because they helped us. When Afghanistan was falling, there were 1,200 Canadians and hundreds more translators and others waiting for help from Canada. What did Mr. Trudeau do? You called an election, sir. You put your own political interests ahead of the well-being of thousands of people. Leadership is about putting others first, not yourself. Mr. Trudeau, you should not have called this election. You should have gotten the job done in Afghanistan.
Mr. O'Toole, as of the beginning...
Hold on, this is not open debate.
Nah.
Leaders, this is a situation where we're asking a question to each of you. No
Denied.
problem, Mr. Trudeau. I'm trying to keep track
I would
myself.
like him, Ms. Curl, because he called an election in the fourth wave of the pandemic with fires in British Columbia and with unfinished business in Afghanistan,
All
Mr.
right,
Trudeau.
thank you, Mr.
So what, you
O'Toole.
can
I'm
only
going
call
to give
a
the opportunity next for
election
the draw to
when
Mr.
it's-
Singh. You guys will have tons of time to debate, so
When
hang
there's
tight.
nothing going on, you'll never get an election. Shut
Sadly,
up.
what's happened in Afghanistan is a tragedy that was something we knew about. We knew about
No,
the withdrawal
but
date. We knew from
he-
President Biden what that date
Did
would
he
be.
didn't have
and,
to have
and
an
sadly, I
election.
agree with Mr. O'Toole on this
No.
point that it was a bad decision to call
But
an
his
election
point is
while
irrelevant.
this crisis was
Yeah.
going on, particularly because we've got allies on the
We
ground
all know that
put
he
their
did it because
lives
it's
at risk to
political
support our
expedient for
Canadian
him.
forces
Yeah.
who are now looking at
But to say,
arrow
you know,
for their
the,
lives and they
because
never
there's,
get out
you
of
know, a
Afghanistan.
fourth wave
You
of the
know, the impact
pandemic
on
in
women and girls in
Afghanistan, it's
Afghanistan,
irrelevant.
it's heartbreaking, and it could have been avoided. Veterans had told Mr. Trudeau and his government for a long time that the current approach was not working. Those calls were not heeded, and as a result, we're in this really horrible situation.
Well,
Thank
it
you,
could have
Mr.
been avoided.
Singh. Thank you, Mr. Singh. Mr. Blanchet.
First, good news, I seem to understand from what I read a few hours ago that Kabul airport is now being open for some people to get out of the country, which is very
I'm
good
with
news.
you, Goat Man,
This
I'm
should have
with
been
you.
worked
Mhm.
a long time ago. I
Glove
agree with
slap,
Mr. O'Toole
baby
that
glove
Mr. Trudeau
slap.
should have
Yep.
put those people's
Glove
interests
slap.
before his own.
I don't take
However,
crap.
the problem is that Canada has failed many times to create some strong partnerships with other countries in order to be stronger facing a situation like Afghanistan now, because by itself, we must admit, Canada is not a world power.
Thank you, Mr. Blanchet. Mr. Trudeau, I invite you to
You're
respond
such a
now.
piece of shit.
Thank you,
I was about to
Mr.
say he's got a point, and then he
It's
ends with that. And I'm
unfortunate
like,
to hear the members, the leaders on this stage talking down the incredible work that our Canadian armed forces,
All
that our
these cunts are
diplomats,
in the
that
same
our
place
consular
right now,
officials
dot,
did
dot, dot.
from the beginning of the summer to
You're
ensure
not
that
wrong,
as of
Seamus.
the very beginning of August, well before this election, we were getting flights out of Afghanistan. We got 3,700 people out of Afghanistan. And over the past weeks, we've been working with the Qataris, for example, on exactly that.
A better question is, why were we there at all?
Yeah,
work with the Qataris. They're very, very
with our allies
trustworthy.
because we know Canadians sacrificed in Afghanistan for a better future.
Well, he supported the Saudi Arabians' appointment to the UN Women's Rights Council. So,
Ms. Paul.
As a former diplomat and with a husband who provided advice on the peace negotiations in Afghanistan, we were hearing the stories all the time in the months leading up that this was foreseeable. And so it seems like we got better information on our smartphones than Mr. Trudeau got from our entire intelligence service based on what he's saying. The thing is that when people count on you, when you make a promise to them, then you do it so that people can count on Canada's word.
That's the
when someone
point
is your
you need to be
partner, you go
making.
with them, you go for them, or you don't amount to much. And so leaving behind people in Afghanistan, walking up to Rito Hall and calling an election under these circumstances was not the right thing to do. And to borrow a line from Mr. Singh from 2019, Mr. Trudeau could just say, hey, man, I messed up.
All right, Ms. Paul, thank you very much. Thank you all. And now it is our time for a first attempt at open debate. Jumping off of this question.
What is
Michael
your
Kovrig
problem,
and
lady?
Michael Spavor have been in Chinese prisons for 1,004 days. The next prime minister has key decisions to make about our already tense relationship with China, such as telecommunications security and foreign investment. Some say this all comes down to a trade-off between Canada's economic growth and recognition of human rights. I'd like to know where you all stand. I'm sure you want to exchange on that. Mr. Singh, per the draw, you begin. Leaders, you may jump in.
Thank you very much. We know that we can't imagine what it is for Mr. Spavor and Mr. Kovrig to be going through 1,000+ days in a prison without access to human rights. I can't imagine what their friends and their families are going through right now. All I know is we have to do everything possible to secure the release of these 2 Canadians. We need to work with our allies, apply pressure, and make sure that we return these Canadians home. That's what we've got to do.
And that's exactly what we've been doing.
No,
Over the
it's
past 3
not.
years, we have worked with international allies.
Of course
to
you
put
have. That's
pressure
why it's
on
taken
China in
years,
every
right?
single one of their meetings.
That's why
We've worked closely, with the United States.
Business as usual as far as it goes with China.
A few weeks ago, worked with the international community to make sure we're moving forward on challenging China where necessary in human rights.
Forward doesn't help Michael and Michael, you piece of human garbage.
And Canada's voice has been
Ways is
very
he
strong
going to
on
work
that.
moving forward?
Canada's voice has been absent, Mr. Trudeau. We have not worked with our allies on Huawei. We have not stood up for the 300,000 Canadians in Hong Kong. We've not fought for the 2 Michaels and put pressure on the communist regime. We have not stood up for human rights. Sir, you did not show up
Bring
for a
out the
vote
pistols,
declaring a
it's time for a
genocide
duel.
towards the Uyghur people.
I
You
like
didn't
that
show
idea,
up.
Seamus.
Canada is the country that was leading the fight against apartheid. We created the UN Human Rights Code.
Yep.
We should be leaders for our values, sir.
Yep.
And you've let the Michaels down, and we have to get serious with China.
If you want to let the Michaels and get the Michaels home, you do not simply lob
Let
tomatoes
the
across
Michaels?
the Pacific. That is what Mr. Harper tried for a number of years and didn't get anywhere. You need to engage
You
in
work with our
sophisticated
allies.
ways
The Michaels
with our
weren't in
allies
prison
every
the
step of the
You
way.
have to take
and
the
put
same
that pressure
position on
and that's
Huawei,
exactly
on
what
steel,
we have done
on
every
aluminum,
All right,
step of the
Mr.
time.
Mr. O'Toole.
cyber security, Mr. Trudeau. We are out of step, and our allies are wondering where Canada's gone. You started as Prime Minister saying you admired China.
If I could,
I'm coming to you, Ms. Paul. Just a second. I want to get to Mr. Singh and then to you, Ms. Paul.
I appreciate, thank you very much, the opportunity. I want to also we're talking about leadership and accountability. And in this pandemic, one of the moments I think of leadership that has been a failure is the fact that when we talk about leadership, it means finding solutions. And in our long-term care homes here in Canada,
Why are you
we saw
changing
the
the
worst
subject?
conditions in
Mr. Singh,
for-profit.
we're going to have
That was
time to chat with
completely-
that later. The topic is China, human rights, and economic growth. To you, Ms. Paul.
Disgusting
Yes,
asshole.
and
Why are
this
you
is an
changing
area
the
where
subject?
certainly lines are being redrawn all across the world. And the main thing that Canada is going to have going forward in terms of currency is its word. When we make a promise, we have to keep those promises. That's how, when we need help, we get it. You know, my mom grew up on a farm in a small community, and she learned very young and taught us that you have to give your word to your
Have you
neighbors,
heard?
and they have to be able to count on it so that when you need help, they're there for you. And so when we don't show up or ask for vaccines from COVAX, and then we take vaccines from COVAX, when the Uyghur ask us for help to declare a genocide and we don't do that, when we don't show up on the climate by setting targets that are ambitious, but at the same time in line with our international partners and do our fair share, then our word doesn't count for much, and then it makes it very hard for us to help people.
As
like
I
the
predicted
Michaels
the other
when they
day,
need us the
like
most.
there's
Mr.
been
Bumstead,
so
do you wanna get
little
in on this?
substance in this
Tomatoes
debate so
might not
far.
be the solution, but I would submit humbly that doing nothing might not be the solution either. The Mr. Trudeau's record on human rights is not perfect. We might name the 2 Michaels, we might name Uyghur in Xinjiang, we might name Taiwan, Hong Kong, we might name Catalonia and Mr. Puigdemont, we might name the worst of all,
Mr.
Raif Badawi being still held in Saudi Arabia because Canada wants to sell weapons and military supply to Saudi Arabia,
Mr.
which is
Okay, gentlemen, one at a time.
2 seconds. The parliament voted unanimously to give citizenship to Raif Badawi. Nothing has been done afterward.
All right. Whoa, Mr. O'Toole, Mr. Trudeau, Mr. Singh.
Mr. Blanchet is correct. Canada is needed back on the world stage. We may be smaller than China with respect to population and economy, but we are a giant when it comes to our commitments to human rights, to dignity, and to the rule of law. And we have to start working with our allies to take a more serious approach for human rights, standing up for our workers on fair trade, and making sure that our voice is a principled one on the world stage again.
The problem
he's not wrong. We are kind of more of the world police than the United States are. Literally, like we send our troops to other countries to be police officers, like in Afghanistan. I hate to say it, American friends, but America's military is more of a police.
I'm giving the last word to Mr. Singh. Mr. Trudeau, please. To you, Mr. Singh.
Mr. Trudeau, standing up. It means standing up for the Uyghur in China. It means standing up to defend people around the world. It also means showing leadership when it comes to fighting the climate crisis.
Here's the thing. I don't want intervention in China. Sure, lobby political pressure on the global stage.
All right, thank you very much.
But at the end of the day,
leaders, we are now moving on to our next theme.
How are you going to pressure a country like China?
You can.
You pressure them. Well, you can. You pressure them by saying, okay, well, if you guys are such egregious human rights violators, you cannot do business in our country.
Yeah. Yeah.
You pursue the Huawei thing.
Yeah.
You say all Chinese-owned land in Canada is now being reappropriated by the Canadian government. Goodbye.
Yep.
And you know what? I hate to say it. It would probably put the lives of Michael in danger, but I mean, that's why they're being held. They're being held because they know that it would look politically horrible if we did such things like put embargoes on Chinese business in Canada. And then they killed them. You know, that's all they're waiting for. I'm sorry. Like, there's nothing we can do for these guys at this point.
School teacher in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. He's standing by.
You can't negotiate with terrorists.
Trevor, what's your question?
Oh, a teacher.
Hey, good evening. As leader, what immediate actions would you take to make green technology more accessible and affordable so that everyday Canadians don't have to bear the financial burden of being environmentally ethical?
That's not what matters.
Thank you, Trevor. Leaders, you've heard Trevor's question. Ms. Paul, I apologize.
How are you going to wave your magic wands and make science and technology more advanced than it already is,
That's exactly
BP?
where your head should be at. That's where all of our heads should be at. How can we use this opportunity to seize the moment to create a green economy? How can we incentivize every single person in Canada, every company, and every enterprise to adopt green technologies? How can we become a global leader? And so, absolutely, if you look at our platform, you will see that we propose incentives all the way from buying electric
leading
cars,
Canada?
new and used,
Let's start with one thing.
Retrofitting homes, to all of these items that will help make life easier for you and help for you to do your part. But this is a national and international issue. We need national leadership on it, and we need it across party lines.
Thank you, Ms.
You know, you realize Ontario with
Thank you, Trevor. Really appreciate
green technology like
I'm sure you speak
nuclear
to a lot of young people
powers the
teacher
entire
and
Northeast.
and are seeing the fear in their eyes, the worry and the desperation that young people have
Oh
because
my God,
they don't know what
these
the
days.
future they're going to inherit. And they're worried
so
about
vapid.
the impacts of the
There's
climate
no
crisis
substance.
because it's hurting us now, and it's only going to get worse if we don't do anything about it. And to invest in that future, we need to make choices. And right now, we look at the choices Mr. Trudeau has made over the past 6 years. He has promised to end fossil fuel subsidies, but instead of ending them, he has increased them to $900 million per year. That is money we could spend on investing in clean technology.
That's because they put money into his wife's charity.
And to do our part to fight the climate crisis. So it's a matter of choices. We can't afford another 4 years of Mr. Trudeau's choices.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. To you, Mr. O'Toole.
Thank you for the question, Trevor. I was raised by two strong women who were teachers, and they told me to be straight up. This is an area where the Conservatives
Whoa,
had
I
to
didn't
win
know
back
that.
some trust. We hadn't met the expectations.
You got
of
two
Canadians
lesbian
on climate
mommies?
change. It's an important issue for me as a father of a
BP.
high schooler, and we
I
talk
didn't
about it
know.
all
I
the
don't
time.
know.
That's why in April, long
Maybe
before the
like
election,
grandma
I
and
put out a
grandma or
substantial
something.
package
Uh-oh.
pricing carbon to meet our Paris targets And what's interesting, our low carbon savings account will allow people to actually make green choices to lower their carbon footprint. This approach is innovative because it would allow all Canadians to know what their carbon footprint is and make those innovative investments to lower it. I think we all have a role to play, and our plan is detailed and will deliver on it.
Mr. Blanchet.
He's born in Montreal and grew up in Bowmanville.
You appreciate a little bit blunt answers. First, you put a ceiling on any production of oil and gas. You take all the money that the federal government is placing into that industry, even more by the Liberals than the Conservatives before, and you put that into green energy. And you take the money for Trans Mountain and you give it to Alberta for Alberta to initiate its own transition toward a greener economy. This is the way to do things, because if we don't do that and keep dreaming about reducing gas emission while increasing production, we will never get there.
Thank you, Mr. Blanchet. Mr. Trudeau.
The thing, he's sometimes very
from one teacher to another, I know.
Realistic in his comments, but
with your students.
Then he says something crazy like he's on LSD.
On here have various claims about what their climate change plan is going to do. Unfortunately, if you look at what the experts and the climate scientists and the economists have said, we're the ones with the strongest plan to fight climate change. And how to answer your question specifically, how to make it more affordable for Canadians? Well, the first thing we did on that was bring in a national price on pollution that incentivizes businesses to go cleaner at the same time as it puts more money in families' pockets. We are going to put a cap on oil sands and oil and gas emissions and decline it until net zero and create those opportunities and investments that are going to make it more affordable for you and your students for many years to come.
Thank you, Mr. Trudeau. Thank you, Trevor. Have a good evening. I'm turning it back to the leaders. It is time for more debate. The draw has Mr. Trudeau and Mr. O'Toole facing off. Your topic is climate change. Even today, 1 in 4 Canadians don't believe that climate change is caused by human activity. How can we achieve real progress when so many people are still debating the fundamentals? Mr. O'Toole, you begin.
How about you start by using the proper terms? It's not climate change. Climate shift has been a thing that has been observable since the birth of humanity.
Because we had to restore some trust on this issue to make sure we can show Canadians we can get emissions down and get the economy working again.
No, it's not.
That is key. We have a plan to meet our Paris targets.
But to say that we're the primary contributors, no, we're not. Climate has always shifted. What we recognize as summertime right now was not always summertime.
Modular reactors. There is so much we can do to get our emissions down, but grow a strong economy, because without a strong economy, we can't tackle climate change. We can't tackle the issues of today.
The reality that Mr. O'Toole has never understood is you can't have a strong economy unless you tackle climate change. And you ask about how you convince the quarter of Canadians who still don't think climate change is real.
Garbage.
Well,
Human garbage.
His party that climate change is real because they voted against that. And that's perhaps why his plan is so weak. His plan is to go back to the Harper targets, to the Harper approach on fighting climate change, which doesn't work. His Costa platform, which he just put out last night, cuts $2 billion from climate investments and from things. And for our friends in BC,
you have never made a target,
has proposed
let him respond, Mr. Trudeau. Mr. Trudeau, let Mr. O'Toole respond to you, Mr. O'Toole.
Thank you, Ms. Curl. Mr. Trudeau always forgets one fact. He has never made a target for climate change. He has great ambition. That's part of the reason we're in an election in a pandemic, is his ambition. He doesn't have achievement. He never meets his targets. So we have a plan that we will meet the targets and get our country back to work.
Except for the fact that right now we are on track.
Gentlemen, we have to wrap this segment. All right, we are moving on. We are moving on,
That's the
leaders.
5th time now that he's been talking over people. I would have ejected him. I would have been like, Mr. Prime Minister, please leave.
I'd like each of you to describe how you'll
But then again, I'm the type of person, I just don't give a shit.
Recognizes the significant
You're not better than
differences
anybody.
involved in fighting climate change. You begin, Mr. Singh. You may jump in one at a time, please.
Of course.
Well, here's the thing. We just heard
Maybe not eject him, but just cut off his mic.
Trudeau argue about who's worse. And honestly, it's a tough question to answer. Let me tell you, you're not stuck with these two. Better is possible. We can invest in a clean economy. We can end fossil fuel subsidies. We can make sure we're creating clean transportation, and we can invest in provinces and territories to make sure they have the resources necessary to fight the climate crisis. I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. I'm going to be a dad soon, and I want to make sure my child grows up into a future that has the same opportunities that I had, that has clean air, clean water, a clean place to live. I want to make sure that that's
as far as I understand it, it is not a national or even less a regional issue. It is a planetary issue. And it has to be...
No, it's not. The only issue that is even remotely related to climate change is pollution. We're still dumping far too much shit in the oceans.
He said in French that he did not want
and our local waterways, and that shit's got to stop.
That was
that I believe wholeheartedly.
In French, no more
climate change, this is bullshit.
I want to hear that in English tonight. Please, please.
Well, Mr.
Hold on. This segment is
quite frankly, this
we're not going to let that happen.
This on the climate, this sort of approach is going to get us nowhere.
Go lick a window if you want something clean.
It is, and the question was an excellent one. This is
already is a bit of a window licker.
Issue. This is a national issue. This is a nonpartisan issue, and we have got to be able.
No,
it
by definition, it is a partisan issue because you're using it as a fucking talking point instead of talking about the science, the actuality of these things. You're politicizing them, and you are primarily guilty for that because your entire platform is politicization of things that aren't political.
To see these leaders come together in the early days of the pandemic, we have got to bring that same approach here. Let's come together because that's what's needed.
Again, this pandemic, this is science has shown us, it's not been a pandemic.
What we shouldn't do and what we need to do. What we shouldn't do is what Mr. Trudeau did: set targets and miss them. We shouldn't promise to end fossil fuel subsidies and then increase them. We shouldn't put a price on pollution and then exempt the biggest
they came together and said,
how can we make money off of this? Invest in provinces and territories with infrastructure that's going to help us fight the climate crisis.
Hold on, Mr. Singh.
With the greatest of respect to
let Ms. Paul respond.
With the greatest of respect to Mr. Singh, we have been making this invitation for years, and it has never been accepted by the NDP or any other party.
All right, we have to wrap this section now, leaders. It is time for me, with great pleasure, to welcome Mercedes Stephenson of Global News. She is joining us now, and she's going to be asking each of you a direct question on climate change. This round starts with Mr. Trudeau. Hi, Mercedes.
Hi,
thank you so
Why
much
are we wasting time on this?
It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to ask you about a question that is on a lot of Canadians' minds, the question of climate change. Mr. Trudeau, starting with you.
No, it's not.
On your watch, Canada's greenhouse gas emissions have gone up every year since 2016, giving this country the worst emissions reduction record in the G7. According to the most recent data from your government,
after it was reduced by 80% over the previous decade.
Just as high as
Shut
they were
up.
15 years ago. Environmentalists say that your performance is insufficient. If you're so serious about climate change, why are Canada's emissions still going up?
Well, we inherited a government from a conservative that did not believe in the fight against climate change, and we had a lot of catching up to do. But what we were able to do in 6 years is bring a national price on pollution, ban single-use plastics, move forward in protecting more of our coasts and oceans and rivers than any government in history, and we are right now on track to
since they've instituted this new tax,
at the beginning at
I use the term loosely because it's actually just a pay-per-use for plastic bags. You get it like Shoppers or the grocery store or whatever.
The only one that can achieve a 40% reduction.
The purchasing of, say, Glad bags, like actual boxes of garbage bags, has gone up by 28% to fill that void.
You would block pipelines trying to go through Quebec. While you were the environment minister, though, you allowed oil exploration and carbon-intensive
quote-unquote ban or
without
disincentivize people from taking those
why the double
bags
standard, and
when
what
they're
do you say to
shopping,
Canadians who feel that
and then they
you're
can't
blocking
reuse them
it
at home, so they have to buy brand new
single-use
plastic bags.
Raised since I've been into this election.
Yeah.
First one is having reversed the 9 B-line of Enbridge, which had been reversed a few years sooner without any evaluation or anything. Second one is a project in Baie Chaleur, which already had been submitted to an evaluation and environmental evaluation. And the other one
Shitty
was
part is
to
not
have
enough
an
people are gonna be interested in
environmental.
watching this.
I will come to that. Evaluation after the exploration.
That's
this
the
is
crappy
all
part.
a build-up made by the
Yeah, even the
previously
commentator beforehand said, "Oh, people are going to watch the first like 5-10 minutes and then tune out."
which the Prime
Like,
Minister did
those are the
not
people who
even
probably
know
shouldn't be
about when
voting.
He attacked me with it. My record is also I've been having signed the carbon market with California, which is still considered the best way to tackle the
let's
gas
do things
emission
the way
through
California
incentives
does
and
because
tariffs
everything is great down there.
around, I wouldn't say the world,
All right,
at
Mr.
least North
Blanchet,
America.
That is time. Mercedes, your next question.
Mr. O'Toole, you're next. Under your plan, Canada would abandon its current climate target. Instead, you would settle for a weaker one. In fact, it's one set 6 years ago by Stephen Harper.
I feel like I just want to
World
spin
leaders
around
are
in my
meeting
chair
this
really
fall
fast.
to ratchet up their commitments on climate change on the global
It'd be more
stage.
productive than
Yet
this.
you would walk ours back. You've said that climate change is real and you've endorsed carbon pricing, but your target is the lowest of all of the major parties who are here tonight. Why should Canadians settle for your plan and a plan that would take our targets back in time?
Because Canadians deserve to have a plan and leadership to make the targets. Mr. Trudeau went to Paris.
Because the
The
targets are
I'm
bullshit.
talking about making are the ones he
Again,
signed on to.
maybe
And
if we
then
went
for
after
6
some of the
years
greatest
did not
polluters
make
in the
them.
world,
He likes to blame
China,
everyone else but himself.
India.
So what we did, because as I said, Mercedes, we have to build trust
I
on this
shall
issue.
be turned
We went out and worked
momentarily.
with
It
the
is
top
All right, I'll
consultancy
try
in
not
the
to blow a
country to come up
gasket
with a
while you're
plan
gone.
to price
It'll be
carbon,
quick.
to get our emissions down to meet Paris, but to also get people back to work. After COVID-19, with $500 billion worth of debt put on by Mr.
Yeah, you're
Trudeau
not wrong,
with the cost of
Pincalo.
living crisis, we also need to
If
have a
this is
strong
such a crisis,
economy
why not be
to
more
get our
aggressive?
emissions down. We will make our emission targets. And I
Because
think
it's not a
important for Canada
crisis.
to have a plan
He's just
to meet
pandering like a
what it signs
politician
on to
to people who are
internationally.
like, "Oh, climate change is bad."
Ms. Paul of the Green Party, obviously environment a big focus in your plan, calls for a 60% reduction in Canada's emissions by the year 2030. Other countries that are making that commitment don't face the same challenges that we do here in Canada. We live in a cold, northern, sprawling country, and our economy still relies on resource extraction, much of which you've said you would shut down completely in your platform. How would you offset the
AKA
economic
wants to ruin
harm
the
that would result
country.
from
Yeah.
meeting such an aggressive target?
Go
Thanks
figure.
for the question. And first, let me say that when I think about our future and I think about the future of energy, Canada will remain an energy superpower, but we will be a renewable energy superpower. And I think
We
about my
already
brother, who was a
are.
roughneck
Have you never
out
heard
on
of
the oil
can-do
patch
reactors?
until the
Those are
button,
Canadian
during the
inventions.
pandemic.
Canadian
And I think about his
nuclear
future, and I know that
reactors.
we have
But
got to
nuclear is
diversify our
bad,
economy.
don't you know
But I
that?
tell the people of Canada today that
Nuclear
what
is
happens next is really up to you. We can keep moving towards a mirage, and that is what these promises are, a mirage that's just
Self-destructive
out there in the distance
fucking-
that we never arrive at. Or you
I'm
can
not
send
gonna
people
go there.
back
I don't
to
wanna
Ottawa
be-
from every single party.
I wanted
who
to
are
get you in
committed to
trouble for
working
the words that I
together
was about to
across
use.
party lines
Let's just
on
say I
the
was going to
greatest
be very
existential challenge of our time and
derogatory.
seizing the opportunity of a truly
Chat, you can
green
use your
recovery.
imagination.
Mr. Singh, you accuse the Trudeau government of being all talk and no action when it comes to climate change, and yet you won't even give
Climate
Canadians
chains?
a straight answer on whether or not you would cancel the Trans Mountain
Are those the
Pipeline
chains that go and
expansion.
beat you idiots
You've had
with for
years
thinking
as
climate
NDP
change
leader
is
to
a
develop
fucking...
a climate plan. Your platform has lots of big ideas and big targets, but almost no details on how you would get there. Don't
Because
you
he
owe
doesn't
Canadians
have
a
any
clear
ideas.
answer on your
Nope.
climate roadmap, and will you provide one tonight?
Other than
Absolutely, and I'm honored
tax,
to do so. We've
tax,
got a bold
tax,
plan.
spend,
Oh,
spend,
he's
spend.
That's going to take a
honored
lot
to
of courage,
provide a
that
plan.
requires lots of
Okay.
investment, because we know how serious this crisis is. And we know what we're up against. Unlike Mr. Trudeau, we're not going to blame previous governments. We know that in power, we have the power to make a change. And if we vote for the same things, we're going to get the
you
same
don't.
results. So I want Canadians to know, you have a choice. We are
But
committed
what is
to
your
ending.
plan, sir?
We'll lay some of it out. One of it is to end fossil fuel subsidies,
You
use that
leaked
to
some
invest
of it
in
out.
clean energy. We would make sure we prioritize investing in electrified
That's an
transportation.
interesting way
We
of
would
putting
invest
it.
in retrofitting homes and buildings to reduce our emissions. There is so much that we can do. We are confident we can do it. But there is a cost if we continue down the same path of conservative or liberals who don't take this seriously. You have a choice.
Retrofitting how? Like, for instance, older buildings like
right.
mine
Thank
use water
Now
heated
it is time
baseboard
for open
heaters.
debate. Mercedes
How are
is
you
going
going to heat
keep
the water,
leaders on
jackass?
theme. I'm going to keep you on time and make
You're
sure
gonna rub the
everyone has a
pipes?
chance to be
Just
heard.
hire some
Ms.
some
Paul, we're
immigrant.
starting with you. Back to you,
Rub those
Mercedes.
pipes, get them nice
Thank
and
you.
lukewarm.
Canadians
That's not how
want
these
their
things work.
government
You
to
need
fight climate
energy.
change, but they also worry about the cost for their families. And we know there will be a cost to this. Why should Canadians trust your party to see us through this?
They shouldn't.
There is a global green
Full
rush
stop.
going on now to create
No,
the competitive
there
green
isn't.
economy of the future. What the Greens don't want to see is Canada being
Solar
left behind,
panels,
because that is
windmills,
exactly what's
this,
happening.
these
You know, I'm
technologies,
sure
these
that the
so-called
last
green
candle maker,
technologies have
was the
stagnated
person
over the last
that had the
15,
market
20
cornered
years.
on candle making. But if
Also,
everyone
in
has
case
moved
you
on to
haven't
LED
noticed, we
lights, then
kinda
you're in
don't
trouble.
live in a
And
good
so what we want
area
to see is
for
us seizing this opportunity. And Mercedes,
Yeah.
to your earlier question,
reliance
if
on
Denmark and Greenland, other
solar
cold
panels
countries, can
and
end oil
windmills.
exploration, then certainly we can do
BP,
it.
say it
And
with
if
me.
27 countries in the European Union can come together
Nuclear.
collaboratively to have an ambitious plan for the climate, then surely with leadership, we can do the same here in Canada. I know Canada can do anything
Been
that
call
any
up.
other country can do.
Jagmeet is telling us we have a choice of
I think we
6
absolutely
chambers
have.
in a revolver, only
Any
this time
type of
there's
energy
only
is
5
removed
bullets.
from the global market. Canadian energy. It's replaced by a bad actor country that doesn't have carbon reduction programs. It doesn't have human rights. It doesn't have
Russia,
engagement with indigenous
Saudi Arabia,
communities. Indigenous
Venezuela.
partnerships in natural resources is huge. So you said the cost. There are tens of thousands of jobs that deserve an economic recovery just as much as anyone else.
Yeah.
There are indigenous partnerships, economic reconciliation, and a move towards a made in Canada net zero by 2050. So let's be leaders
net zero.
in getting carbon emissions down and being world
There
leaders
is,
on how
you know what net
we
zero
have
means? That
natural
means
resources,
killing
whether
every
it's
last human
energy,
being,
timber,
animal.
rare
Well,
earth
let's talk
minerals,
about the
everything.
EVs,
Mr.
then we
Singh,
can be world
Mr.
leaders
O'Toole,
again.
let Mr.
Let's
Singh
let's
respond.
talk about the cost. The cost
such
of
thing as
inaction
net
is an
zero.
entire town of Lytton being wiped out by a climate forest fire. The cost
What?
of inaction is forest
Yes,
fires and
it's the-
flooding
it
and
was
heat
the-
waves
it
that
was
mean
the
Canadians
climate.
lose their lives. The cost of
Oh,
inaction means
it's
a young
climate
woman met in
change
Hamilton
that causes
who looked
heat
me in the
waves
eyes and said,
and
what's the
forest
point of me
fires
pursuing my
and
education? What's the point of me finding a
idiots.
partner or even starting a family when I don't know what type of future I'll live in, let alone my child? That's the
Won't
cost
somebody
of inaction.
please think of the
That's
children?
the cost of Mr. Trudeau, who had 6 years
Yes,
to do something about this.
everybody
Again,
is
It's not
an
2 years. It's
Again,
not a
Mr.
small
Singh,
mandate.
goes, "What's
6
the
years,
point?"
and he
Love
failed
it.
to.
We're-
And
again,
it
Trudeau.
cost
Again.
all of us.
He had
When we
6
talk
years
about
to
a
reverse
climate crisis,
thousands
we
of
have to deal
years
in
of
facts. And one of
climate.
the facts I need to correct right now that
I'm
everyone has laid into is
I'm
we
on
have
my
not
second
missed
very
any
tall
of our targets. We are on
glass
track
of
to
very,
exceeding
very
our
heavily
targets, and it's
laced
important
Each year
that we are
talking
on
about
facts.
juice.
Secondly, I do have a question from Mr.
No
Singh.
sense at
We
all.
need to talk about science. We need to talk about experts.
I'm
We agree
pretty-
on that, you and I both. So
Yes.
how is it that the experts that have rated our plan on climate to be an A,
Yeah,
have
that
rated
last
your
double shot
plan
is making
to
me a
be
little
an
belligerent.
F?
Experts, the
I rate
experts-
your track record an F,
No,
Mr. Trudeau.
no.
You've
No,
had
not
6
you.
years.
You don't get to rate.
I
People
rate.
know.
Well, not just
Politicians.
me.
Oh, no. You don't get to rate it.
Experts give you an F on
Let
your
me-
climate
Let
plan.
Mr. Singh
Let's
respond,
talk about
Mr.
right now.
Trudeau.
Let me respond to this. Let's
did they
talk.
give you
You're
an F?
talking about the future. Let's talk about right now. You had 6 years,
Why did
and
you
you've got
get
the. Let me
an
finish.
F
Let me
on
finish.
climate?
Shut the fuck
You've
up,
got the worst
Trudeau.
track
Jesus
record in
Christ.
all the G7 after 6 years.
How
How
can
can
people
people trust you?
Why
How can
didn't
people
you
have
put
confidence
forward
Trudeau,
an
hold on,
ambitious
someone that is
all right,
plan?
Mr. Singh,
He
Mr.
didn't
Trudeau,
answer.
then Ms.
Why
Paul,
did he
then
get
Mr.
an
Blanchard.
F
Mr.
on
Trudeau.
I don't
his
accept that, first of all. I don't
Time's
accept that at all. We've
wasted.
got a
No,
bold
hold on,
plan
Ms.
and
Paul.
a strong plan.
Mr. Singh,
Whoa,
thank
whoa,
you very
whoa.
much, Mr. Trudeau.
Get heated about these
He
things.
cannot
Lady,
explain
put on your big
why
boy panties
his-
and fucking
his
control
plan
these
We've got a
is
strong
being
plan.
panned by experts. Now, every
excellent plan.
politician up here says we have the best plan. We actually have a
Except you have the
record.
worst
And
record, though.
what
Mr. Singh.
Mercedes' question was, how do we make sure it's affordable? We brought in a price on pollution across the country that puts
Mr. Singh,
more
stop
money
right now or you
back
get
in
no
the
juice.
pockets in the provinces where it had to be imposed because conservative politicians fought against against it every step of the way.
Ms.
And
Paul,
exempts the biggest polluters.
Ms. Paul.
With the greatest of respect, I think
And
the five
I love
what
how
has-
she
keys in
keeps
our
saying
shadow
that,
cabinet
with the
who put
greatest
together
Yeah.
our
respect.
green
She doesn't
green
respect
recovery
anybody.
policy would disagree with you with the experts. But I do want to say more generally that again,
what was
this
I
is
gonna
getting
say?
us nowhere. We have got to.
Oh
be
yeah,
able to come
the
together
Liberals'
across
plans
party
on climate
lines,
change, which
not
has also
only
contributed
to
to our
face
inflation, the
existential
reduction of
crisis
our
that Mr.
dollar,
Singh described,
and
but
the
also to seize the greatest
shuttering,
economic
in
opportunity
addition to
that Canada
pandemic
has
type
seen
stuff, but
within
that's
our lifetimes. We are being
that
led
has
and
affected
if
our
the
economy
United States can
greatly.
do it, if the
Yeah,
European
that was a
Union can do
great
it, I
idea.
know
Why
that
is nobody
we
talking
can do
about
it.
that?
It's about a change in the culture.
All right, thank you, Ms. Paul. Mr. Blanchette, did you
The
want to
clock
get
shows
in?
that I'm quite behind everybody else, and I have 12 seconds left.
Take some
I will
time,
disagree
sir.
with the basic statement. There's possibility to create more wealth to absorb the cost of the changes that we need. We must stop opposing environment and creating wealth. It may go together well. This is the change that we have to do.
Thank you, sir. Thank
He's
you,
entirely
Mercedes.
correct. Why do you
And now,
think that
leaders,
the
we are
most
moving
advanced
on to our
nations
next theme,
are the least
reconciliation.
polluting? Oh, God.
Oh, please, God, let the climate change thing be done.
Now we are going
Yeah,
to our
they're going on to
first-time
reconciliation.
voter, Merrick McLeod in Sault Ste. Marie. He's got a question to all the leaders. Merrick, you're 18 years old. You're a first-time voter.
Lord.
What is your question to the leaders?
Hello.
Go ahead, Merrick. The leaders are listening.
Ani Bojo. In the Ojibwe culture, trust and respect is key to any relationship.
You got it, Merrick. Keep going.
How can I trust and respect the federal government after 150 plus years of lies and abuse to my people? And as Prime Minister, what will you do to rebuild the trust between First Nations and the federal government?
Thank you, Merrick.
TikTok video,
Leaders,
honey.
you've heard the question. How do you respond to Merrick? Mr. Trudeau, you start this round.
Thank you, Merrick, for your question. You're absolutely right. Over the
We're
past
at the
150
donuts.
years,
That's his
Canada
question.
has failed in its relationship with Indigenous peoples. People
Yeah,
who
we
should
have.
be,
We should have
working
either
with
kicked
and
them into the
share
curb or
stewardship of
stopped
the
giving
land,
them
working with
handouts.
in partnership. As
Sorry,
we draw
not
from
sorry.
the
You're either
bounty and the beauty
part
of
of
this land
Canada
to
or
build a
your
better
own
future for all. That is why
society
over the
within a
past
nation.
6 years,
Pick one.
we have stepped up
Yes,
on the
hello,
path
and
of
that's his
reconciliation.
question.
We have ended boil water advisories in 109 different communities. We have made sure that tens of thousands.
You ended the
of young
advisories,
people
but the
get to
threats
go
are
to
still
school in
there,
better
you
classrooms.
fucking
We
piece of
continue to
human
move forward
garbage.
on fighting.
Is he even human?
Missing,
He's
fighting
just
for the
garbage.
missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and ensuring a true partnership.
Thank
as we
you
move
for your
forward in
donation.
respect.
Exactly.
Mr. Blanchet?
Your question is quite moving. I would say that no one is entitled to tell any nation what to do or what to think, and that every nation has to be recognized as
Oh, he's
such.
making it all about him.
Either it is a nation of
The
300
separatists.
people, like there is in Quebec, or an 8 million people nation like Quebec is. It calls for
not
a
about
relationship
you
between
right now.
equals. It calls for a relationship in which nobody
And you know
tells
you
the other
have
party
Indigenous people
that
in
they
Quebec
are
That's
too.
not how a
bigger,
country
richer, and
works,
therefore
you
will do
fucking
as you are
muppet.
told, even if we say it politely. And first, you provide clean water.
If you don't want to be in this country, you can leave.
Thank you, Mr. Blanchette. Ms. Paul?
Yes, and thank you so much for the question, and I understand the anguish in it as well, because justice delayed is justice denied.
Do you really?
And coming from a diaspora myself, where we have
Oh,
been robbed
Jesus.
of our culture, of our languages, of our history. I
What
have no
culture?
idea where my ancestors were born or where they're buried. I
Who
completely
cares?
understand how important this is and how frustrating it is.
What
not
does that have to
see
do
the
with your skin
action.
color? I don't know where
I'm
mine
tired of
are.
being up on these stages without Indigenous leadership here to speak for itself. Jody Wilson-Raybould, Mumalak Kalak, I'm thinking of you right now. And when Ms. Kakak said that without action,
Did she
that
just have a stroke,
the
or is that her
Parliament would be
name?
hollow, she was right. So Indigenous sovereignty,
Miss
self-determination,
Kalak.
nation-to-nation engagement, that is my commitment.
Mr. O'Toole?
Mr. McLeod, thank you for the question. And the way you phrased it is so important.
At least he was.
Reconciliation is about trust and respect and
boot.
restoring it after a century and a half of a federal government failing. That's why, as opposition leader, my first question when I rose in the House of Commons was on a call to action on reconciliation with respect to Indigenous health. We need to build partnerships. We need to restore trust.
No,
and that trust is
no.
eroded when you make commitments on safe drinking water on reserve, when you make commitments on the calls to action in the Truth and Reconciliation Report and have no plan to fulfill them. So I want to build partnerships and have Indigenous leaders have governance over the federal government finally delivering on our commitment to Indigenous people? Thank you very much, Merrick. Thank you for your question. How to restore trust. How do you restore trust when Indigenous communities suffer injustice and it continues in an unbroken line to this very day? How do you restore trust when you've got a prime minister that takes a knee one day and then takes Indigenous kids to court the next? And how do you restore trust in a country as wealthy as ours?
Why are you wasting your time
G7
answering
nation
this kid's
in the
question by
21st
asking him more
century
questions?
that still does not provide clean drinking water to every single Indigenous nation? It starts by actually walking the path of reconciliation, not with the empty words, but real action, clean water, nation to nation, and respect.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Singh.
Yeah, I was just about to say the same
Did
thing.
the leaders answer your question?
I don't remember what my
Thank you
question
very
was.
much. Miigwech. Messieurs Blanchette and O'Toole, it is your turn to debate now. You've promised more money to search for unmarked graves, but so much more needs to be done to achieve
Oh my God.
meaningful
Are we just gonna
reconciliation.
regress?
Mr. Blanchette, you begin. Tell
Unmarked
me, how
graves.
are you better
The
positioned
world is
than Mr.
covered in
O'Toole
unmarked
to
graves.
restore justice?
I am not better positioned than Mr. O'Toole because I believe that this is a relationship between nations. And, you know, your presence a nation, I feel I represent another one. And we are discussing with a lot of other nations. But I will remind everybody that on the
I wouldn't
last day
go
of the
after,
last
but I would
session,
allow
we
the courts to pursue
had
it.
a motion
I wouldn't,
adopted
give them
by
any sort of
Parliament,
barriers
and
on the
this
federal
motion
level, but I wouldn't
was
go after them.
precisely saying what we had been told to carry by the First Nation leaders, and we had it adopted. This might be the way to
Probably
do it. Many times
give
the Bloc
the-
Québécois said, even if we don't agree with everything,
The
that
parties
we would
interested in
share our
pursuing
seats and our
investigation,
voices
some
in the
resources
Parliament
to
with the
pursue
First
that
Nations
investigation.
in order to have them being heard by the whole country.
After the tragic finding of graves in
Did I
Kamloops,
just hear a
Cowessess,
small
and other
child run down
former
here?
residential school sites, we offered to work in a bipartisan fashion on calls to action 71 to 76. Those are related to former residential school sites.
I need
and
more
we need
ice.
to act faster. I know
I
Mr.
need
Trudeau
another
cares
shot.
a great
This
deal
is
about reconciliation.
insufferable.
I know we all do. But this is an issue where we have to act. We can no longer say that we recognize the calls to action. We need a plan to achieve them. And what I'm proposing is a plan that builds partnerships, that builds governance, that has Indigenous leaders, incredible ones like Jody Wilson-Raybould, to allow us to actually hold ourselves to account.
Yeah.
All parties, all future governments. This is the biggest scar in the history of Canada. And we have to tackle it not just with good intentions, but with a good plan to deliver for all Indigenous people.
Mr. Blanchette,
I must
briefly.
say that the Prime Minister has nominated Gouverneur Général, I don't know how to translate that, who speaks Inuktitut, which is great, but does not speak French. Still, he does not agree with the
You
idea
don't know how to
of
translate
acknowledging,
Governor General
recognizing
from French to
First Nation
English?
languages as official languages in his country.
All right, we will leave that segment
Thanks a
there.
lot, good
Ms. Paul, Mr. Singh, Mr. Trudeau, you're up. Tell me, what is your plan to end the ongoing disproportionate violence against Indigenous women and girls? Ms. Paul.
The first thing is to make space for Indigenous leadership because, we have done all these things and made all these promises.
Leadership
We
of
know
what?
needs
They
to be
lead
done.
their
The
own little
recommendations are
communes.
there in the calls for
They're
justice
not a
and the
part of
Missing and Murdered
Canada.
Indigenous Women and Girls report, and yet
That was
we
the
still
whole
don't
point.
have the action. And so, as I said before, it should be Jody up here answering
This
that
bitch
question.
has
It
been in
should be
politics
Lumilak
since she was
Kakak up
12.
here
She
answering
doesn't
that
know
question.
anything.
We
It
need
should be
to make
Jody
a space
up
for
here
Indigenous
answering.
leadership
Jody's
to guide this
not
process,
a
and above
fucking
all,
party
we need
leader.
to make this
So
a
no, it
priority.
shouldn't be
All
Jody.
that is left now is political will.
But that is exactly what we have been doing, Ms. Paul. When we called the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls after years of governments avoiding doing
Hey,
that,
Selecta
we
boy.
ensured
And
that we
then
brought
you
the truth forward.
ignored
And then
all of
we
their
worked
fucking
with Indigenous leaders groups,
recommendations.
Indigenous women's groups to co-develop the action plan plan that we are now fully
You
funding so we
called
can get
the
justice for the
commission, but you
victims,
ignored
healing for
all
the
of
families, and put an
recommendations.
end to this ongoing national tragedy.
Yeah, because it's
It will
political
take
theater.
a lot of work by
Remember,
all of
he's
us,
a
but
he's a
we
drama
are
teacher.
walking
He's not
this
an
road
actual
in partnership
representative.
because we know it needs to be done, and there is much more to do.
He's playing a
Mr.
part.
Trudeau, sadly, and this, I don't take any pleasure in this.
Another double
the
shot.
costs of justice
Ugh.
are out there, and you haven't acted on them. And I meant it when I said you can't take a knee one day if you're going to take Indigenous kids to court the next. That's not leadership.
Mr. Singh,
That's
you
not going to
love
make things
that
better.
line about taking Indigenous
not
kids
a
to
line.
court. It's actually not true. We have
Trudeau.
committed to
How can you
compensating
say that?
those
You can't
kids who went
say
through
that.
that.
You
And what's more
can't
than
say
that?
that.
This is important,
No,
Mr.
you
Singh.
can't say you're not
When
taking them
you
to court
talk
when you're
about-
taking them to court.
When you talk
there
about
are kids out there
how
that are being
assess.
fought by you in court.
Leaders,
You
I
can't
would
say that.
actually remind you the question
say
is
that.
about violence against Indigenous women and girls. Let me recenter you on that.
I appreciate it because he can't continue to say that. That
Well,
doesn't make any sense.
and Ms. Curl, I will say again, I said this last night in the French debate, this is why we need more diversity in politics. This is why we need people to be
Shut
who are
up,
most directly
racist.
impacted by
You
issues
don't
to be able
need
to speak for
diversity
themselves
in politics.
because
You
we are
need
drifting
people who
off into
actually
things
care
we have
about
only
getting things
dedicated 2
done
minutes to talking
for
about
their
The
how
best
we are going to
ideas,
bring
regardless
true
of what's
justice
between your
to
legs,
Indigenous
what
women in this country.
pigmentation your
Yes.
skin is,
Mr. Trudeau.
who you sleep with at night. Those are irrelevant things that a bigot cares about.
Buried in unmarked graves across the country because it was a tragedy for all Canadians, one long known by Indigenous peoples. But when I went to Cowessess to speak with Chief Casmus Delorme, we not only grieved those kids, we signed an agreement, a landmark agreement
screw
to
young
keep
boys,
kids
Ellen.
at
Nobody
risk
cares about young
in their communities, to take them out of the provincial system. That is how we move forward. It took years to sign that agreement, but we got it, and we are empowering Indigenous communities
Mr.
to
Trudeau,
care for
we're
their
out
own
of
kids.
time. Mr. Singh, I'm going to give you very brief moment to respond. Briefly, we're over time.
We need to implement all the calls to justice. We need to listen to Indigenous women and girls. We need to make sure that they're safe, and we have the steps that they've laid out that we need to follow.
All right, thank you very much,
Yeah, and
leaders. Now
screw
I'm
the- and
really
screw the
pleased
Indigenous
to welcome
young
Melissa
men
Ridgen of
and young
APTN
boys, too.
News.
Screw them.
Melissa's going to be asking
And screw
you,
the
Melissa, a
the
direct
actual
question on
Canadian,
our theme of
the women who are
reconciliation.
actually
Your first
Canadian
question,
citizens
hi,
who
Melissa,
are being
is to
assaulted by
Mr. Blanchet.
lots of
Over to you.
Tanshe, thank you all for being
quote
here.
unquote
It's a pleasure to be here with you to
refugees.
ask some questions for our APTN audience. Mr. Blanchet, I'm going to start with you. You know, numerous government reports, including in Quebec,
What is wrong
have
with her?
sounded the alarm that systemic racism exists, from Joyce Echequan dying as she's taunted by hospital staff, to policing, the justice system. What will you do as Bloc leader to address systemic racism in your own province in Quebec and also elsewhere in Canada?
First, never underestimate the weight, the sadness of those dramas. Second,
what does that
I
mean?
acknowledge, I recognize the existence of systemic racism in June 2020. And then, what happened? It became a political tool against Quebec. It became a tool to say Quebec is this and that and racist and xenophobic and all of that, instead of
Dude, you
opening
don't
a discussion,
allow immigrants
trying
who
to
are
find
citizens
solutions,
of Canada
consulting
to choose where they
experts,
can send their kids to
discussing
school.
with the
That's
First
pretty
Nations
fucking
themselves.
racist.
It became this white society against this other one, white society. We build nothing, so the words became toxic. I'm
What are you
absolutely
going to do? Where
open
do
to
we
the
go from
idea
here, then?
of discussing all of that on a quiet stage without this aggressivity, being aggressive as this debate has become.
All right, Mr. Blanchet, we have to move on. Your next question, Melissa.
This question's for you, Ms. Paul. You know, Canada has more children in government custody right now than at the height of residential schools. New legislation, child welfare legislation, actually takes the onus on and puts it on the First Nations communities to bring their kids back, cleaning up the mess that Canada has created, essentially. And those children are going to have to be brought back to all of those same problems that still exist that were the grounds for apprehension. What would you do in the House of Commons to make sure that poverty and trauma issues are addressed?
Thank you very much for that question. And absolutely, we mentioned that not that long ago in one of our statements that the residential school system had been replaced by children in care, and that this was just perpetuating the legacy of trauma. It really comes back to what I said before, which is that the Indigenous leadership is there. It is ready to guide all of these processes. We have all of the recommendations we need. What we are missing is political will. What we are missing is those who have been in power for a very long time, making space for new voices and diverse voices. I actually had to pull my jaw up, which just dropped, when I heard what Mr. Blanchette said. I invited Mr. Blanchette to get educated about systemic discrimination. I extend that invitation again. I would be happy to educate him.
It's nice to want to educate
This
me.
is my time, sir.
It is.
Thank you.
So nice time to insult people.
That was not an insult. It was an invitation to educate yourself.
This is leaders'
That-
direct questions.
You don't know
Melissa,
anything.
so
Educate
Mr.
yourself.
Blanchette's-
In this
Okay.
debate, since I'm many minutes behind everybody else, there should be some
Mr.
decency
Blanchette, you
in
have
the
had
debate.
every opportunity to
It's
jump
your
in an open
responsibility,
debate.
not mine, but some things
And
cannot
I
be
am
said.
No, he
fulfilling my
hasn't.
responsibility, sir. Melissa, we're going to keep moving on.
Is
Your
it my
next-
turn?
It is your turn.
Thank you. Mr. Trudeau, this is
Wow.
for you.
Is it
Your
my
Liberal government has
turn?
turned Indian affairs
Yeah.
into two separate, massive
This entire thing
bureaucracies
has
that
been a
give large
fucking
portions
farce.
of
I don't
funding
like
that will never
Blanchette,
feed
but he's
it on
not
to
wrong.
deserve. It doesn't leave the bureaucracy. You've promised clean drinking water, but billions of dollars later, that's not happened. Many still do not have clean drinking water. Canadians and Indigenous people are losing patience
Maybe you
with
should stop
the
shitting
lack
in
of
your own
results
rivers.
from all of this spending. So I guess the question is, why would they believe you a third term, that they would get results and you would be accountable
was
for all that spending?
Inaccurate
One
of
of
me,
the
but
enemies of progressive
not
politics,
too
Melissa,
far from the
is
truth.
cynicism. Is discounting the hard work that millions of people have been involved in over the past years. And yes, there's always more to do. Progressives always know there's more to do. But when we came into office, there were 105 long-term boil water advisories. We lifted 109 of them, and for each of the ones that are remaining, we have a project lead, a project team, and an action plan, and we're going to lift those all. There are
Ooh,
tens
a
of
project
thousands
lead
of kids
and a
across this
project
country,
team
Indigenous
and
kids
an
who've
action
started the school
plan.
year in new schools or refurbished schools.
A
We have moved forward on
refurbished school.
settling more agreements and more land claims and more partnerships than any other government over the years.
Sorry.
We continue to work in partnership and respect and invest more money in Indigenous communities than any previous
Thank
government.
you.
And no,
Thank
we're
you,
not
Mr.
done
Trudeau.
yet.
I
I
think
We
think,
have more
I think
plans.
the money, I don't
80%
think
of
anybody's
the
questioning the
bands
money
wanted.
spent. I think that they're questioning the results for the money that's spent. My next question is to you, Mr. Singh. Federal forces, including the RCMP and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, have been used throughout Canada's history to prevent First Nations from exercising their treaty rights to fish and to hunt and to defend land and water. This is happening right now on both coasts, including under the NDP party in British Columbia with regards to fishing and logging. So my question would be to you, as Prime Minister, what would you do to ensure Indigenous rights and title are finally respected in this country?
I really appreciate the question. First of all, we need to respect Indigenous treaty land and rights. That's a fundamental
That's what
step
she
towards
just said,
walking
yes.
the path of reconciliation in a really meaningful way. But you mentioned the RCMP, and I got to talk about the really sad reality that there's been violence, heavy-handed violence against Indigenous communities, against peaceful protesters, and I have long called for reform of policing. When I was in the provincial level, I fought against carting. I've continued to use every platform I have to say we've got to stop the use of
Fight against
force.
carting.
We've got to overview it. We've got to change the RCMP's
Fight it! Whoa,
mandate.
whoa, whoa!
And
Fight
that's
against
something we can
carting.
do at the
You were
federal
one of the
level. That's
assholes
something
who
that
was
Mr. Trudeau
demanding a
said he would do
national
and yet
vaccine
has yet to
passport.
do. And it's something I'm committed to making sure happens.
Mein Führer.
Mr. O'Toole, next question's for you. You voted against the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People that would share decision-making power with Indigenous people over what happens on their land. And you also want to criminalize Indigenous dissent that's expressed through blockades or protests. So the question is, if you're Prime Minister, how could Canada build a respectful nation-to-nation relationship with Indigenous people?
Thank you, Ms. Ridgen. And this goes very similar to Mr. McLeod's question on trust and respect. I want to build those partnerships. And that's why our only concern with the United Nations Declaration was how free and prior informed consent was defined so that it didn't stop partnerships from being formed. I'm really glad to say one of the early leaders behind the UN Declaration,
Everyone else
Chief
was
Willie
like,
Littlechild, has agreed to
Merrick,
serve
like
as a
he
special
was-
counsel to
you-
me
yes, he
on
was
the
a kid, but
implementation of that to
like,
make sure that there are partnerships
at
and
least
opportunities.
O'Toole was trying to
What
at
I want
least
to do
give
as
him
Prime
a bit of
Minister is
respect
build
as,
that type
you know,
of
now you're an
nation-to-nation
adult now.
dialogue and partnership so that the next generation has intergenerational wealth and opportunity transfer, not trauma. And building that trust will be core to me. It's why, as I said, my first question was on reconciliation. We have to make progress.
All right, thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Now we move on to open debate. A reminder that Melissa will be here to keep the leaders on theme. I will be here to do my best to keep you on time. And all of you have an opportunity to jump in
some of the
after
tribal
Mr. Trudeau
leaders can
begins
be
with a question from Melissa.
Okay, I think if there's one thing that Canadians and Indigenous people can all agree upon, it is that this Indian Act system is not working for anybody. How would you dismantle this broken top-down system, and what would you replace it with that would ensure that Canada still is living up to its constitutional obligations to Indigenous people?
First of all, we are looking forward to dismantling the Indian Act. It is a commitment of ours. But it is not something that Ottawa gets to decide.
6 years to do it, dude.
What replaces the Indian Act will vary from community to community as we live up to our obligations. And that's why over the years, as we move
we
towards
either
self-government,
shit or
we've
get off the
accompanied,
pot.
Communities.
Stop giving them money.
Start with health, some will
Let
start
them
with
be
education,
their own
some will
autonomous
start with economic development.
communities within
Every
Canada.
Community, every nation across
Not
this
beholden to
country
Canada,
gets to help define
but
what its
not
path is
suckling at
forward.
our teats
We will be
anymore.
there to
Or
listen, to partner,
full
to build a
integration.
better
You are
future
now
every
full
step of the
Canadian
way.
citizens
The way to go forward is to
in
listen to
Canadian
leaders.
communities,
Mr. Trudeau
beholden to
ignored one
Canadian
that he had in
laws
his own
and
cabinet,
taxes and
Jody Wilson-Raybould. That was
responsibilities,
a huge
including
lost
things like
opportunity.
military
We've been
service,
speaking to
all
people
that.
about how we can accelerate
All the
treaty
wonderful
resolution.
benefits
There are
and
some treaty
bounties
negotiations, Ms.
our
Richardson, that have been
nation
going on,
can
as you probably
give
know, for
Well,
decades.
there have been
We
lots
need to
of
solve it,
Indigenous people
and we
that
need
have
to
served
work
in the
with
military.
Indigenous leaders. There's incredible Indigenous leaders in nonprofits.
Yeah, no. I'm just
in
saying,
the
like,
private sector, in
like being
industry, in
eligible for
academia.
a God forbid
We need
draft.
to use that governance capacity.
There's
to finalize
responsibilities that
treaties
come with
and
being
build
a citizen of
partnerships.
any
Because
country.
the best way forward
It's not all
is
just
success for
sunshine and
Indigenous
lollipops.
peoples alongside their neighbors.
Free healthcare.
alongside
Mr.
their
Singh,
free.
Mr. Trudeau, I'm coming to you,
more
Mr. Trudeau.
I'll
Mr.
just jump in
Singh.
on this one point. I think absolutely the solution has to be Indigenous-led. And I think that's the starting point. And for a long time, we've seen that there's been a top-down approach that has to change. It has to be Indigenous.
All of their
But I wanna
answers
talk
are,
about
we're going to
the
throw
impacts,
money at
just
the
so we
problem.
understand how severe this is, how the Indian Act is creating injustice and perpetuating injustice. I spoke to B, who's a young woman, a young girl who lives in Niskandiga. And she told me in her own voice, she said, I'm a 12-year-old
She
girl.
told you in her
and
own
I'm fighting
voice,
for
did
clean
she?
drinking water. How does that make any sense? Those words haunt me to this day. Think about what 12-year-olds do, and they certainly aren't fighting for clean drinking water. That is a legacy. That is the impact of the Indian Act.
I want to go back to what Mr. O'Toole has been saying, because he's
And
very
Carlo,
able
when
at
we
saying
get the
all
Mac,
the
the
right
new
things, but there
Mac,
are countless examples
please
of
can
him
we set up the
actually
Love
not
Flanders
living up
thing?
to his words. We've seen it
For
on
the
the
Helen
Helen
Lovejoy
campaign.
quiz.
but
Won't somebody
Indigenous peoples
please think of the
specifically.
children?
Yeah,
Yeah,
he says we
that.
need to listen to Indigenous peoples. Well, he proposed that
yeah,
he
we'll
would
get you a good
raise
soundboard running.
flags that are at half-mast for the kids in unmarked graves in residential schools. And he didn't talk to or listen to any Indigenous leaders when he made that decision. And that's something that is important and symbolic, but wouldn't cost a cent. How do we believe
Bullshit.
that he would be able to actually make the investments
Ms. Paul is
necessary?
trying to get in here too. I'd like
Hold
to hear
on.
from
Yeah,
I'm going to give Ms. Paul and Mr. Blanchet a chance to jump in. We haven't heard from them yet.
You just attacked Aaron O'Toole, and you're not going to let him
And I
respond?
really again want to
I asked Mr. Trudeau to move
No,
immediately.
hold on, Ms. Paul.
I really just want to try to recenter our conversation on Indigenous peoples and what we are going to do to fulfill the many unfulfilled promises and commitments that have been made. And I would say perhaps to pick up on what
I'm
has
going to
been
finish
said,
this
that it
shot, and then,
seems
yeah, I'm going
all
to join
too
you and
often
roll myself a
that,
little something, because this is
reconciliation
getting
is
unbearable.
treated like a buffet. You can opt in for this,
Isn't
pick
it, though?
this, pick this plate, but not the other one. And that applies to what we've seen with Mr. Trudeau and the Liberals. You can't, on the one hand, say reconciliation and then go and not allow Mi'kmaq fishers to
Carlo,
have
Bubba.
decent, moderate living for all of these years. You
Carlo,
can't call
Bubby, sweetie.
reconciliation and then take Indigenous people
Someone
support.
started
And Mr.
handing
Singh,
out
you
pearls
also
to
can't say
Clutch, yeah.
reconciliation and then support the NDP government and putting pipelines through Indigenous
Oh,
territories
BG.
or
That's
support Line 5
savage.
after
Savage.
the Anishinaabe made it very clear that they did not support that project.
Ms. Paul, I'm going to allow Mr. Blanchet to get in. He's been signaling he wants to.
Yes.
I will come back to the two of you.
no.
Mr. Blanchet.
One
First
tribe
Nations and
signaled
Quebec
that they
have
didn't want to
something
be
in
part of an
common.
agreement.
They are binded by a document they never signed.
Bound, sir.
And any relationship between nations should be dealt with freely signed treaties or
Why
agreements
is he
or something,
pretending to have
the
problems with
Indian
English?
Act has to be replaced
He's
one
not
nation
this
at a
bad
time,
at
if
English.
need be, by and with freely signed
He
treaties
kind of is.
and
No,
agreement.
he's
There's
usually
no other way.
not.
And if I may come back a few seconds
one
on
of
something else.
the
Quebec
French
wants
speakers
religion
that
out
can
of the state affairs because
speak
religion
pretty well
never
in
protected
English.
equality
He has been.
for women and never.
You got to remember, he's still at the end of the day, he's
over
still
time. I'm
native
gonna
French
give you both
speaking.
the
So
chance to briefly
sometimes
respond,
the
Mr. O'Toole,
the
then Mr.
translation
Singh. Briefly,
just
please.
he fumbles
I am
on
proud
it.
of this country.
He's a good
And
speaker.
I think if you love your country, you can dig deep to make it better. So as Prime Minister on the National Day of Reconciliation on September 30th, I will raise the flag with a commitment to move forward on calls to action. Mr. Trudeau promises things, doesn't deliver, and then when people protested him, he mocked them. That is not reconciliation. So you can be proud of your country as you strive
All
for
right,
it to get
thank
better.
you, Mr. O'Toole. Mr.
What
Singh,
the
briefly.
I think that
Why are they
Mr.
cutting
Trudeau may care.
O'Toole
I
off
think he
quicker
cares.
than
The reality
everybody
is that
else?
he's often done a
Because
lot
they're
of things for show
liberal,
and hasn't backed those up with real action. And the
supporters.
harm is that Indigenous people continue to suffer, and that's what I want to stop.
I mean,
want to stop the suffering
as much as I
and
hate the
lift up
block,
Indigenous people.
Blanchette has
Mr.
every
Trudeau,
right
we
and
gotta
has,
go.
has
Mr.
been
Trudeau, 5
right
seconds.
Unfortunately,
about the amount of time that
cynicism
he's been
that
given
Mr.
compared to
Singh
everybody
is
else.
showing on saying we did nothing is harming reconciliation and the path we're moving forward. We have
No,
lots more to do.
you
and
have
we
done
are
nothing.
doing
All
it.
right, leaders, thank you. Thank you, Melissa.
Merci, merci.
Marcy.
And now it is time for our
Marcy,
fourth
Marcy.
theme for
Did
the night,
she just try to say
affordability.
merci? She didn't even say merci. She
It's
said
time
Marcy,
now to bring in Janet Falla.
Marcy.
She is a senior working part-time in Burlington, Ontario. Good evening, Janet. Please tell us what your question is to the leaders.
My question is this: at my age, I never imagined that I would have to keep on working, but I have to afford to live where I do.
Yeah.
So I'd like to know, when they become Prime Minister, what will they do to help us seniors survive?
Thank you, Janet. Leaders, you've heard Janet's question. We're starting with you, Mr. Blanchette.
Merci, Madame. For many months now, the Bloc Québécois has demanded for the government to increase the amount of money being provided on a monthly basis to our elders. It's nowhere in the Conservatives program, and in the Liberals program, it starts at 75, nothing below 75 for this pension. I'm not sure about the word in English. It has to be done. Those people are those who suffered the most from the pandemic. Their power to buy things was reduced. Their
Notice how
fact that they were
nobody's
alone
talked
more
about
than
the
never
disabled.
before was made worse. And the stress, the anxiety they lived with is terrible. We want something to be done, and it has to start with a monthly check, seriously increased.
Thank you, Mr. Blanchette. Mr. O'Toole.
Thank you, Ms. Valla, for the question. This is a crisis facing our country.
An actual crisis, yeah.
And it's hitting our seniors the hardest.
And disabled people.
That's why in Canada's recovery plan, our plan to give you a break, we're going to double the Canada Workers' Benefit. There are many seniors like you having to work to keep up with the cost of living. We're going to double that for you to give you a break. We're going to get bills down for internet, for cellular phone. We're going to get grocery bills down. That is our plan and our commitment.
And
in
what are you
December,
gonna
we're going to
do
give you a
about
break with
disabled
the GST
seniors?
holiday
What are you gonna
and
do
help
about
bricks and mortar
disabled people
stores
in
in the
general?
process. Mr. Trudeau is borrowing every day $424 million, and he's causing an inflation crisis. We have to secure.
Pincalo,
and
come
that's our
on, you can't
commitment
just
to
say
you.
then move. I mean, if you don't have money, you can't move. And if you do move, where are you going to move to? It's not like
that seniors have been
any of these places are cheaper than one another.
The extra costs, which is why we stepped up.
I live in Toronto. I looked at the other side of the province, the other side, and the cost was pretty much the same.
Increase the guaranteed income supplement for our most vulnerable single seniors.
The problem is the dollar keeps
in our
we're
proposal
losing
in
our
this
purchasing
election,
power
but
with
we're
our
also
dollar,
moving forward with increasing
while
the OAS
the
for
safety
all
nets that
seniors
should
over
be in
75,
place
because we recognize that the costs
to
continue
protect the
increase
most
as
vulnerable people,
you
and
get
just
older,
people who are
and
disabled,
continue
the
to want to live
elderly,
at home. We're giving you
etc.,
more supports so you can
has
stay at
not
home
gone up.
safely and make those
Is not
renovations
kept with the
importantly.
rates
We will
of
continue to have your back
things, which
as we have through this pandemic.
let's
and into the
boil
future.
it down to the
Thank you,
problem
Mr.
is that
Trudeau.
the
Mr.
fact that the
Singh.
dollar doesn't buy
I wanna
as
thank
much
you
as
so
it
much for your
should,
question. And one of the things that you mentioned
and
is that you didn't think you would have to
governments
keep
in
on
place
working.
right now are
And I don't think our
actively
seniors should
moving
have
to
work.
worsen that.
Seniors want to contribute by working, and that's absolutely their right. But you shouldn't have had to work. And in a country
Why not?
as rich as ours, we should make sure our seniors are
Why
able to retire
not?
with dignity.
Dude, I'm
You've got the
disabled,
supports
and I
necessary
could
to
not,
live a life
I
of dignity.
can't wait for the
So what we're
day, if it
proposing
ever
to do is
comes, that
put
I
in
can get
place
back into
a guaranteed
providing
income for
something,
seniors
a
so they
little
can
bit
live
of
with
something
dignity
back
and
for
not have to
myself.
worry about paying the bills. That's a starting
I
point.
applied
What
to
we've
be
seen
on
so far
the
is
Toronto
that Mr.
Transit
Trudeau and
Commission
Mr.
City
O'Toole
Council
both are going to
board.
either cut the help that you receive or put the burden
I got
back
my
on people
call
like
back
you.
today,
We
actually,
believe that the
after
ultra
my
rich should
dentist
pay their fair
appointment.
share for once and invest.
Could you imagine
in
me
you,
on a city
invest in
council?
families, invest in people.
Thank you, Mr. Singh.
You want to do what? You're fucking
Thank you very,
insane.
very much for the question. And as someone who comes from a family where my grandma and grandfather had to work until actually they were kicked out of working because they needed to keep working to afford the basics, I completely understand what you're saying. And this is an
This drives
opportunity
me
for us to
nuts.
learn
Yeah,
the lessons from
this
this
is-
pandemic and to really get to the
Let's
heart
educate
of things
people
and
on
to
the
stop
benefits of
talking
the
about
family
symptoms,
unit
but get to the root causes.
and how families should
We
take
need
care
to
of their
have,
own.
absolutely.
Sure,
It's so
that's not
wonderful to
everybody,
see the consensus building
but it's a
around
part of the
guaranteed
problem.
livable income, so that whatever your
We
circumstances,
kick our
you can
children
live with
out at
dignity.
18.
We need
We kick our
universal
seniors
long-term care.
out
That's a
into
huge expense. It
old
was
folks'
for my
homes because
family.
we're too
And
busy
we need
working
more affordable
6 jobs
housing.
between
Let's
2
get
people.
to the root causes.
Those are the
Thank
root
you,
causes.
Ms. Paul. Mr. Singh and Mr. Blanchet, you will both square
And what
off
we
now.
what we
You
what we
both
seem to
talk
forget
about
is A,
affordable
we are living
housing,
longer
but we
than
know
and longer
that
and longer
affordability
lives.
means
And
different
B,
things to different
before
people,
we
depending
had
on
things
where
like
in the country
pension
they
plans
live.
and such.
So when you
People
talk about
worked until
affordable
they
housing,
died.
who are
Affordable
you really
housing,
talking
this'll
about?
be
For the
good.
draw, Mr. Singh,
Affordable
you
housing.
begin. Mr. Blanchet, you may jump in anytime.
We're talking
China.
about people who are spending right now more than half their income on housing. That's not affordable. People should not be spending so much on
I
housing
spend
that they have no money
100%
left
of my
to
income
pay
on
for their
housing.
groceries, to pay for their bills.
Yeah.
And
My
the sad
entire
reality is,
disability check
since
goes to my rent.
2015 to
Right,
now,
yeah.
It comes
the
in, it
average
goes to
cost
my
of
landlord.
housing
Yep.
nationally has gone up to buy a home by $300,000. So far, the
Peeling
housing
back
crisis
the
has
veil a
gotten
bit,
worse over the past
I
6 years.
rely on
We want
charities
to invest in
to
housing.
feed
We want to
me.
invest to make it easier to buy your
Yep.
first home.
Because
and to invest to
disability
make sure there's
pays my rent, and that's
available,
it.
affordable rental homes.
Let Mr. Blanchet respond.
Could anyone tell me how to translate logement social?
Social housing.
Social housing might be a solution to another problem. People are paying, at least in Quebec, people are paying far too much for houses because the prices have increased tremendously. The idea is to reduce the speed
Because
of
we
that
keep
increase
dumping
while
tens of
helping
thousands
people
of people
who
into
cannot
these
afford
communities.
Yep.
decent lodging. If we build more social lodging, which price are obviously
No,
very
how about
lower,
we
much
ban
lower,
foreign
then it will
investment?
lessen the pressure
Thank you,
on
BP.
those houses to become more and more
Which has done more to drive up the price
expensive.
of
I don't
rental
want
units.
a
Reduce this.
fucking
I wouldn't
cookie-cutter
speak about
house.
an inflation
Yeah.
crisis, but I would speak
I
about
want
an inflation worry,
people from other
which we
countries to
must
buy
have,
houses in their fucking
at present
countries.
times. So I believe one thing
And
might
want
be
choice.
I want to buy a house
for the
in
other thing
my
we speak
fucking
about.
country.
All right, Mr. Blanchet.
Yeah, we
that's
want the
time.
choice
I'm sorry, Mr.
to be
Singh,
able to
that's
move
time.
to a place
you speak about
that we can afford.
inflation, Mr. Blanchet, and
We don't
and that
have
brings
that
us
choice
to our
because,
next
like you
topic.
say,
So,
the
Mr.
foreign
O'Toole,
investment
Mr.
buy up
Trudeau,
all the
and
rental
Mr. Paul,
properties,
you're up. Inflation is at its highest
inspire
level
building
in a
more
decade, and it is
condos, which are
squeezing
grossly
Canadians on staples
unaffordable,
such as groceries, gas, rent. What's your message to
and
Canadians
dissuade upgrade
are struggling
building
make
companies
ends
to
meet
building
for the
rental
dream
units,
in the
which
field.
are long-term
Well, unlike
investments.
Mr.
Condos
Trudeau,
are short-term
I will
investments.
care about monetary policy because we need to keep
Yeah,
inflation
Piccolo
low.
says I've got to get
There is a
about an
crisis
increase
hitting
of about
families, and Mr.
$600
Trudeau
a
seems
week to get off
completely
disability.
oblivious to that. Bills
Piccolo
are going
has
up.
to make
There's a
an
housing
extra
crisis,
$600
as we
a
talked about,
week
and he's making it worse
for us
with,
to
as I
get off
said,
of
almost
disability.
$500 million of borrowing
And even then, that's
per
just
day.
like a net neutral,
There's real
right?
risks
And
on
then
the
we have to
horizon. So we
figure
have a
out,
plan
like,
to
does
get people work,
disability still
get
cover
people,
benefits,
get
or
their
do we
bills
have to
down,
buy
give
health
them a break.
insurance?
Canadians deserve a break
You
and
know,
balance
like-
the budget
I think it
over the
does.
course of the next decade. That's exactly
But
what
I'm
we
not
need
sure.
to fight against Mr. Trudeau's inflation.
I believe that you could stay on, not be getting your
It's just an excellent question, and if you come to my neighborhood of Toronto Centre, you will see those
funding,
people
but
living
you can
in
still stay
inadequate housing.
on
You will see
the.
people paying
If you're still
more than
obviously,
half of their income just to
you're still
for things like
disabled,
childcare.
you can still
And, you know,
access the
there's this
healthcare parts
expression,
of
in my
the
culture
support.
where you
I
talk
would
about
hope so.
soon come.
I'm almost certain you can,
to
because
tomorrow and tomorrow that should have been done
I've had that
today.
conversation
This
with,
is soon
again,
come. Soon come is
still
now.
looking for
We
work,
have got
but
to
I'm
learn the
very
lessons of
limited
the
in the scope
pandemic
of what
and
I can
make
do.
sure that we have a social
right now.
safety net in place that lets everyone live with dignity. When we invest in our people,
And
we are
Goatman,
investing in our future.
You're
and
not
this is the
wrong.
time
They
for us to
want
do that.
life
It
to be
costs
so
us
expensive
not
that we
to
must
do it.
rely upon the
Over
government.
past year and a half,
Exactly.
I made a
They want us
straightforward
all
promise to
sucking
Canadians
that
that
tea,
we would have your backs.
because if
And
we
that's
were
what
to go
did.
against them,
During this pandemic,
no
we
milk.
were there to support people. But at the
Yep.
same time, we need to continue that. That's why we've put forward a $10 a
Oh,
day
move
child
forward.
care
There we
proposal
go.
that will
And that's
save
not governance,
the average
VP,
family in
that's
Toronto
tyranny.
close to $10,000
Oh, move forward.
more than
Drink
Mr.
again.
Yep, move forward.
Mr.
Here we
O'Toole's
go.
approach on
Mr.
childcare,
Trudeau.
which
Ah!
we also put
It
forward a
burns.
national housing plan that will invest $4 billion to work with
The housing
municipalities to create
crisis
1.4 million
has
homes.
gotten worse
Mr.
under you,
O'Toole's
Mr.
plan
Let him
on
respond,
housing.
Yeah.
Mr.
Mr.
Trudeau.
Amazingly
Just
worse
finish
under
this.
Trudeau.
housing
Mr.
crisis-
O'Toole's plan on housing gives $500 million on breaks to the wealthiest
That's
landlords
completely untrue.
and
Mr.
nothing
O'Toole.
for
No,
building new
where
The
is
housing.
he
housing crisis
coming up
has
with
gotten
this
worse
shit?
under Mr. Trudeau. And months ago, he fought against us trying
His
to
earpiece.
take foreign non-resident money out of our housing market. We've got
Thank
a plan
you.
to get rental housing built. We've got a plan to get density, 1 million new homes in the next 3 years.
With no
and to
money
give
on that
first-time home buyers
Not a cent
a break
towards that,
by a
Mr.
longer
O'Toole.
mortgage. And Mr. Trudeau, Canadians are worried you're going to be taxing their primary home sale. Your
That is
advisors have said it. Your
untrue.
candidates have
That
said it.
is
It's on
untrue.
page 14 of his policy book. He's introducing a new tax
All right.
on the sale of homes.
Leaders, there will
for
be
the
more
middle class.
opportunity to speak about these issues. Thank you, because guess what? I'm bringing out Rosemary Barton of CBC News, and she's going to be asking you more
totally
direct
can call him.
questions and opening up more opportunities for
It
debate.
should be an
So
individual's
on this
income.
theme of affordability, hey Rosie?
Hey, Shashi, thanks.
But if
Good to
you've
see
read,
everybody. Appreciate you being here.
the
Let's try and get
author's
some
kind of a
answers.
undercunt,
Shall
but
we?
if you've ever
Ms. Paul,
read
I'll start with you. One of the
the
plans that you've
Two
laid
Income
out,
Trap,
to tackle affordability
very good book.
is a guaranteed
I
livable
forget
income.
who
You
wrote
mentioned
it.
just moments ago. Give people a set amount of money to deal with their lives. There was an expert panel in British Columbia just recently. that
Elizabeth
said
Warren's
that is
book.
not the way forward. That actually is too complicated for the needs
It was
of our society
Amelia
and the
Warren,
needs that are
and
so
also
diverse. Why do you think this is
contributions
still
by
a
Elizabeth
policy
Warren.
worth pursuing?
Say what you will about the woman.
Guaranteed livable
She
income
was
is
a part of a
policy
book
whose
that
time
actually
has come. You
addressed
saw at
and
the
talked
beginning of
about
the
that
pandemic how many
specific
people were
problem.
thrown immediately into financial crisis
that has
because
caused
our patchwork system
a plethora of
simply isn't
problems
working. There is
in
a
Western
growing
society
consensus.
in the last
the members of the Liberal Party
century.
voted for it at their convention. The members of the NDP party voted it at their convention. 50 senators signed a letter calling for it. The time has come to ensure that everyone has the support that they need to live in dignity in this country. The parliamentary budget officer looked at guaranteed livable income. He examined the model in Ontario. And here's what he said. He said that it would lift half of the people who are in poverty.
It means all blacks get mansions.
Affordable, and that it would not disincentivize work. This is the time.
No,
for
she
Let's do it together.
she is the epitome of the hyper-progressive, racist
You would
piece
scrap
of
the
shit.
deals that the Liberals have made with provinces, which drops fees by 50% immediately, and
I rolled a
creates
joint.
spaces, and eventually will
It's just
reduce
been
that
sitting
to
here.
$10.
My bad is
Instead, you're
clogged.
proposing a tax credit that would reimburse just some families $6,000 a year. So, what does
She
your plan
has
do to
one of
create
the worst
spaces
ratios
and lower
on
fees? Because as you
YouTube.
know here,
Oh,
it's not
does
just
she?
about affordability, but also
on
about
the
access.
CBC website. Yeah.
It's about helping all families now, not in 5 years helping some. And our plan would help lower income families with up to 75% of the cost. Our plan will also help that nurse on shift schedules that has jobs in the evening, that needs flexibility. What we want to do is help all families get ahead
But
and
if the
provide
nurse
more
can't find a
support
spot,
for the
Mr.
lower
O'Toole,
income.
what does
Would
she
you
do?
let
If the
him
nurse can't find a
fucking
spot,
talk?
what does she
This
do with her
gives her as
children?
much flexibility as possible. If there's not one in her suburban community, there is no space in 5 years under Mr. Trudeau's program. We want to give families the tools to make the best decision for the position they're in now, to have ability to help them in their circumstances. Our plan will be immediate. It will help all Canadian families.
Mr. Singh, you're promising to tackle skyrocketing housing prices. One of the ways is with that 20% tax on the sale of
Shut up,
homes
Karen.
to foreign buyers. 2/3 of Canadian families actually own a home already. If you're successful at cooling the housing market, that would mean that people who have invested their life savings in their homes may not have it anymore. They're relying on that for their retirement. So what is more
She's
important
less of
to
a
you?
Cory Bush,
Helping
more
younger
of
people get access to the market?
who's the old
or
scummy guy
allowing
who
older
used to lead
Canadians who
the
rely
Labour
on the
Party in the
value of
UK?
their homes to
Oh,
live?
Jeremy Corbyn.
Corbyn.
Really fair question.
She's more of a Corbynite.
And when
She's
I spoke
very
to people,
racist, very
I go
anti.
door to door in my
She's a
riding
Jew,
authority
so she
who-
can't
people
play
who've
the
got beautiful
anti-Semite
homes. I ask them, what's the number one concern? They say housing. And I kind of look around at their house and say, well, you've got a home. They say, well, I'm not worried for myself. I've got a place, but I'm worried about my kids. And they're more concerned that their kids will never be able to find a home than their own circumstances because they're okay. They are worried about their kids. And the reality is, it is impossible for young people to even imagine buying a home, let alone renting a place that's in their budget. So we've got to get the big money out of housing. Young people, young families, professionals shouldn't have to compete.
So your answer is that it is more important
Communism.
for young people to get into the housing market.
His
rather
answer
than
is
for people who
communism.
have equity in
It's
their
only
homes.
young
If anybody
people.
wants to know what
that,
Jagmeet Singh's
everyone's telling us
plans
the
look
number one
like,
concern they have
look
for
up
their kids
the
is that
communist
they're not
block
sure they're ever gonna
housing
be able to own a
from the
home.
former
We wanna change that. It's
USSR,
gotten worse with
Yep.
Mr.
and
Trudeau.
hear some of
We're
the
gonna fix
horror
it.
stories of the
Mr.
conditions,
Blanchette, nice to see you, sir. Seniors, as you were talking about off the
the
top there, really
massive
worried about the
increases in
increased
crime in
cost of
those
living.
areas.
You,
They
as you
were
said, have criticized the Liberals
off the
for
ground
increasing
ghettos.
old age security
It was
only for those
disgusting.
75 and older. But statistics show time and again that older seniors are less likely to have employment income and they actually have higher health expenses. So why should an increase in seniors go to all seniors instead of those who need it most?
First,
How about
the
we
city
just have some
prime
healthcare
minister
review?
is supposed to be the champion who fights against all kinds of discrimination, and it did create himself two classes of elder seniors. What they want is for those between 65 and 75 to spend their private funds in the meantime.
No, but I've just given you the example about why. I've
will-
just given you the example about why the government may have done that, sir. It's
May
because
I-
people
may
who
I
are 65 to
propose my own
75.
answer, please?
May I follow up, please?
No,
Those
you
who
may
are
not.
generally
Let him answer the
employed
fucking
and
question.
generally
You
have fewer
hippopotamic
health
landmass.
Wow.
Those people
That's
have worked
fucking
all their
wow.
lives until 65 years old. They have paid for a pension that should be the same for everybody. And for some financial issues, the government creates two classes of seniors. It is unacceptable,
No,
and no calculation
has
whatsoever should be so unethical.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blanchette. We are now moving to the open debate.
Oh,
I just
there's
have a
been
question for
one.
Mr. Trudeau, I believe.
One guy.
I'm very
If you don't
sorry.
Two
mind. I don't
guys.
think we should
Sorry.
let him off the hook. I think we would all agree.
I got a little mixed up there.
Making some of our arguments
No,
on the
no.
other ones.
Well, we'll make you uncomfortable now, sir.
There we go.
You said in 2019 that Canadians should never have to make the, and these are your words, impossible choice between paying for medications or putting food on the table. We have seen you, particularly in these recent months, willing to spend billions of dollars on programs that matter to your government. Daycare would be another example of that. Why is there no money in your
daycare.
platform or in your most recent budget for a national pharmacare program?
No.
Is it no longer a priority? And should
Actually,
you not just tell Canadians that?
I'm on board with
continues to be a
national,
priority because
not
indeed,
national
no one
pharmacare,
should
but
have to choose between
expanding
paying for groceries
provincial
and
healthcare plans to
medications.
cover pharma costs.
On health investments,
Yes,
we
freaking
were
increase
all,
the
focused
transfers
on
to
COVID-19 and supporting the provinces and making sure that on that we were
allocate,
giving the
say
support
like,
we
okay,
needed so we
you
could have
must
Canadians
spend
back.
this money
But
that
at the
we
same
give
time,
you on
we
fucking
worked with a
pharmacare,
number of different
but no
jurisdictions
federal
and we actually
pharmacare.
signed
Yeah, no federal programs.
federal
Fuck that
programs.
noise.
Fuck
We don't need
off
more federal
with that noise.
programs.
Yeah, you signed one deal, sir, but there's nothing in your nothing in your platform in terms of costing. I understand
Does
the
she
pandemic
not
kept you
wanna
busy. What
fucking
about
let
going
people
forward?
talk?
Why wouldn't you put
Going
that in
forward,
place?
we are
No,
going
she
to
doesn't.
continue to.
Like, I
That's
don't
why
like
nobody
Trudeau.
likes her.
I don't like
We
Trudeau,
did
but
with
I
Prince
mean,
Edward
like,
Island. We're going to continue
least
to
let
do
him
with
talk.
others in respect of the provincial jurisdiction that is delivery of health care. We can't impose pharmacare in a province that doesn't want it, unlike the NDP proposes. We are going to work in partnership, as we have on so many things, to get it done like we did on childcare.
Okay,
Get it
and
done.
now we're going to move to open debate. Starting back with you, Rosie.
Okay, and we start here, I believe, with Mr. Blanchette.
That's correct.
So, Mr. Blanchette, what is one policy change that you think
See,
would make the
BP,
biggest
at least we're
difference
actually
to
covering the debate.
or
Somebody
sectors
like
in your
Lauren
case in
Southern.
terms of
Sorry,
the
Lauren,
cost of
I
living?
love
What
you.
change
You're
that
gorgeous.
you would like to
You
see
got a
that
good
help
brain
them
in your
the
head,
Cost of
but
living,
you're playing
that's
Minecraft
quite
instead of
interesting
covering the
because that's
debate.
a word that we
Come on.
have.
Yeah.
Come on.
We believe
Come on.
that the most important thing is changing the way we create wealth. We believe that
Minecraft.
transforming
What
our
is this,
own
1997?
natural resources with our own clean energy in our regions of Quebec will create more wealth. This wealth will come from an environmental, I will get this word, environmental preoccupation as well. And we will do that, and we should be entitled to do that with our part of the money that is being sent again and again in oil and gas. There's one thing I want to add.
Shut up and let him speak.
I don't know if there's time eventually.
Not really, but quickly.
Wow.
Yes.
Will we have some seconds to speak about French-speaking communities and Acadians?
Well, not in this
debate?
section. This is about cost of living, sir.
And to you, Mr. Singh.
Nowhere. That's my problem.
Oh, we've got time to talk about the
cost of living
poor
is going up.
blacks
Cost
and
of
the
medication is
indigenous
going up.
people and
Cost of
everybody
being
else,
able to
but
afford the
can't
medication
talk
that keeps
about
you
French.
healthy. Mr. Trudeau,
Can't talk about Mr. Whitey.
$0 in your fully costed budget means zero commitment.
talking about
have a fully costed
$0.
immutable
But
characteristics.
You've shown your evidence with your costed budget. You've shown Canadians clearly you've got no interest in doing something that you promised to do
in your
2 years ago.
platform, Mr.
You promised to do it 2 years ago. You committed. You campaigned on it. You included
You're
it in your
done.
throne speech, and now you've completely abandoned it. How can people trust any promise you make when there's $0 in your plan?
Okay, brief response. Then Ms. Paul, then I'm coming to you, Mr. O'Toole.
How can we
Brief
trust anything he says when he's reneged on like
$1
80% of his promises?
in our fully costed platform for health, for the priorities that Canadians have told us on. Better support for seniors in care, better support for mental health services across the country, particularly for young people, and access to a primary care doctor.
APP, how long has he had
what $25
to address these
billion
issues?
over the next
fucking
4
years,
years
and
gives. Mr.
why is
O'Toole's
nobody
money
talking about the
health
disabled?
is backloaded to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years
All
from now.
right, Mr. Trudeau,
I
thank
appreciate
you.
that they
I'm
finally
reminded
moved
what
on
the
to
question was.
healthcare
The
in
question
some
was what
respect.
policy would have the biggest impact on people's cost of living?
Ms. Paul.
And I think that we have a perfect example of this again here, because the biggest thing that could make a difference in the cost of living for people is a change in the culture in Ottawa. It is so painful for me because I've had the experience of,
Race-
again, having my
racism?
grandparents work
Race-
until they were 75
race?
and living 600 and 800 square feet and
Come
wondering
on,
how
you
we were going to
fucking
feed ourselves
racist,
some
say it.
nights.
Yeah,
I've
no,
had that
no
experience,
white
and I know
person's
that
ever
one
lived
day
in
of
a
delay
place
is
that
too
small.
much. So
No.
when I think that we could have been in Parliament now working to get people the help that
What
they
is
need.
the policy, Ms. Paul? These are anecdotes. What
all
is
of
the
these-
policy
It's
was
not
the
It's not
question.
an anecdote. The thing
And
that
that
we
is
do
exactly
a change.
what
I see you,
that
Mr.
is.
It's a change
O'Toole.
in the culture because there are several parties on this platform right now that agree on guaranteed livable income and universal pharmacare and childcare.
my policy-
But it's
No,
always soon come.
we
It's
don't
always
need
soon
a
come.
All right, thank you, Ms. Paul. Mr. O'Toole, you've been waiting. I'm going to get you
allowed
in.
to
the Canadian
work.
workers'
We need-
benefit. That amounts to $1 per hour raise for working families. These are people working very hard, and I respect whether they get up to work a shift in a restaurant or work to open their small business. We're going to have your back.
Why
We're
is it
also gonna
your
get
prerogative
costs
to
down.
tell
We're the only
employers what
party
they have
with
to
a recovery
pay
plan that
people?
includes all Canadians. And when it comes to cynicism that Mr. Trudeau talked about earlier, all of the commitments continue to be a priority. He's going to get to the calls to action. He's going to have transparency. He's going to make targets. He announces things and never delivers.
That is
Mr. Trudeau, a
not
prime minister
wrong.
has to deliver on the word,
Not wrong.
not just
That is
fancy
simply
words to
not
make
true.
promises, a plan to get there.
By the way, Mr. O'Toole, I won't take lessons from you on making
Oh,
promises and not
good
following
Lord.
up. When we see you're
Stop
beholden to
saying
the gun
that.
lobby, we're holding to anti-vaxxers, you're
All
beholden
right.
to a
Remember,
range of
this
people.
is affordability,
Policy,
and Mr.
the
Trudeau, I'm
affordability
sorry, we're out
policy,
of time now,
I've
sir.
been responding to people. Can I answer Rosie's question directly?
You have 5 seconds, sir.
We were able to lift 1 million people out of poverty and create
That's
1
not a
million
policy.
jobs at the same time with the right kinds of investments over the past 5 years.
And Mr.
That's what
Trudeau,
we're gonna
I have
continue
to,
do.
I'm sorry, sir, I have to wrap you right there because it is now time for our next theme on COVID recovery. Rosie, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Oh, this ought to be good.
Okay, from Saskatchewan, Ethan Herman is standing by in
look,
Saskatoon.
finally a
He's
dude.
an undecided voter and
This
he
is
wants to
dude
hear
number
from you
3.
about COVID recovery. Hey, Ethan, go ahead.
Shit.
Hey, good evening, leaders. My question is this. Coming out of this pandemic, how are you, if elected as Prime Minister, going to unify and drive Canada forward with respect to healthcare, jobs in the economy, and ensuring a higher quality of life is achievable for all Canadians, regardless of race, color, creed, or sexual orientation?
I mean, what's already set forth in the fucking
How are you going to
Charter?
adhere
That
to
is
the law?
exactly why I launched Canada's recovery plan on the first day of the campaign. We're going to create 1 million jobs in 1 year. We're going to clean up the
No, you're not.
accountability mess in Ottawa. We're going to have national
Maybe.
leadership
I doubt
on
it.
mental health. We're going to be more
Doubt
ready
it.
for a pandemic, and we're going to get our
it.
finances under control. I want to get people
Maybe.
working. I want to give families a break. And since the moment I became Conservative leader, I've been reaching out, whatever your background, your faith, your color, your sexual orientation, whether you're Indigenous, whether you're a new Canadian,
Say it.
you're important to Canada's recovery.
Nope.
And you're important
Wrong thing to
the
say.
Conservative Party. And I'd
No,
ask you
that's not
to
the
look
wrong
at
thing to
Canada's
say.
recovery
I
plan.
disagree.
After these 18 months as a
It's not
country,
important.
we need a
It's
plan
it's
and
the
a leader
complete
that will
opposite. It
actually
doesn't
deliver.
matter.
Thank you, Ms.
No,
Paul.
that's what he's saying.
Thank you,
He's
Mr.
saying
Herman, and
whatever
I
you are,
swear I did
doesn't
not line
matter
up that
what
question.
you are.
He's
You're
not a
important
ringer.
to
But
Canada's
this really
recovery.
comes to the heart of the matter, which again,
Well, either
is
it
the
doesn't
fact
matter
that
or
the
it's-
culture
he's
of
just
politics
trying
in
to-
Ottawa.
I know.
He has to
We
hit
have
all the
heard from
buzzwords,
outgoing
but he's
MPs
saying,
in
you
the
know,
last
whatever
parliament.
I know,
how
and that's why I hate him,
important
because he just
that
panders
is,
to
that the
fucking
culture has
talking
become
points.
The shit
toxic,
part-
that has
the
become
shitty part is though he
hyper-partisan.
has to.
And, you know, there used to
No,
be
he
a time,
doesn't.
I worked as an intern
Well,
in
look,
a
He really
nonpartisan
doesn't. I
way,
mean,
in the
that's
Ontario
another debate for
legislature.
another time.
You
But
would
I
make
mean,
a fuss and
it's
question
something I
period,
take
and then
issue
you'd get
with.
to work
What's, I don't
across
agree to
party lines
disagree.
and committees to find the solutions to help people
Oh, well,
in Canada.
the racist
I
is
would
And
say
so
not.
we
he
need
is a
less
bit
partisanship.
soft-
We need more
softer than he
diverse
could be
voices so that we can get the access to
on
the best
TV.
ideas in a more
He's much
cooperative
harder
and
in the House of
collaborative way.
Commons than he is on TV.
Mr. Singh.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Herman, thank you for your question. And your question touched on a number of things. Healthcare is something very near and dear to my heart. And we've seen in this pandemic that our healthcare system simply hasn't been there. And it's not because of the pandemic. A lot of these problems were there from before. So our commitment is to invest in our healthcare system, to defend it. Unlike Mr. Trudeau and Mr. O'Toole, who believe
Invest.
in private
So you're-
long-term care delivery, we want to get out
With a
profit,
healthcare
get
system
out the
that is
greed
woefully
from the delivery of
mismanaged,
long-term care. We want to invest in
woefully
pharmacy care
misuses
for
the
all,
money
not
that we
promise
do
it in
give them.
2019
Your
and then have
solution is to
$0
give them
commit
more
towards it.
money?
We want
The
to see
healthcare
everyone
system
have access
that
to
isn't your
medication. We want to
jurisdiction
include
in the
dental
first
care
place.
into our healthcare system and mental health services. And to do all of that, we want to make sure that
Like
the
you said,
billionaires start
a
paying their fair share
contractual
so we can invest
thing
in
with
you.
the federal payments to say
Ethan, I think the folks on this stage missed
this
the very
X
first
amount
part
of
your
money
question, which
has
is,
to
you know,
go
once we
to
get out
these
of this
programs
pandemic,
or you
and
don't
yes,
get
we have
it.
plans for
Yeah.
being even more
Done.
ambitious on climate
Here-
change.
The
and
money
yes,
we're
we have
already
good
giving
jobs,
you, we're saying
but we
has to
have
be
to get
spent
out of this
certain
pandemic
Here's your
first.
transfer payment.
And that's why
This
the
amount of money,
unequivocal
it has
leadership
to be spent
that
on
we've
mental
shown
health
as a
services.
government on
This
making
amount of
sure
money has
that
to be spent on
everyone
dental
gets
services.
vaccinated
This
is
amount of money
what's
has
going
to
to
be
get
spent
us
on
through. We
ocular
cannot rebuild
and
the economy
ophthalmic
until we get through
services.
this pandemic.
Yeah.
And unfortunately,
Like-
Mr. O'Toole, who says he wants to get all of Canada vaccinated to 90% in the coming 2 months, can't even convince his own candidates to get vaccinated to 90%.
No,
we have to get through this.
What
We
happened to
are
our body, our
unequivocal that
choice?
Vaccinations are the way to
Thank
do
you,
it.
He
Mr. Trudeau,
doesn't
Mr.
want.
Blanchet.
He's
I
saying
think
that
Mr. Trudeau forgot the second part of the
he's not.
question,
He
which is
doesn't
about
want
healthcare.
his
Let's be efficient.
candidates to be
Healthcare is
forced
a jurisdiction
to
of
choose.
the provinces and Quebec.
There's a difference,
Those are
you
the
liar.
territories, the jurisdictions who should have the resources to do their job. The promises of the Conservatives is 3.5% of increase a year for the first 3 years, which is very far from what the provinces asked for. And what the provinces asked for is not even in the program of Mr. Trudeau. So it will be hard to be efficient if those who are responsible of healthcare do not have the resources which are owed to them.
Thank you, Mr. Blanchette. Thanks, Ethan, for your question. Have a good night. We're going to let you go. It is now time, Ms. Paul and Mr. Singh, to go face-to-face, starting with Ms. Paul. And I want to talk about Canada's parallel pandemic, the opioid crisis.
Oh, boy.
Since it has taken hold, more than 20,000 Canadians have died, often in the shadows. This is an insidious killer that is tearing families apart. To both
Whoa,
of you,
whoa, whoa, whoa,
starting
whoa!
with
Back
Ms.
the
Paul,
fuck up.
does the
She's
political
conflating the
will
numbers of
exist to
heroin
confront it?
to opioids.
We called many
to the
times during the last session of
pharmacological
Parliament,
opioids.
across
Fuck
party
off.
lines again
Two
for us
totally
to
different
first recognize
situations.
that this was a national health emergency.
No, it
and
wasn't.
then
It was not in
decriminalize,
Canada.
simple
Yes, there
possession,
are
because we know
pharmacological
we need to end the
abuses,
stigma
but it's
and
not
create a national safe
an
supply
emergency.
program. We asked every
Not
party
up
to
here.
do it because 17 lives on average are being lost every day. We didn't hear anything from anyone, and it comes back to Mr. Herman's question about unity. Can we not unify on something like this where it's clear what we need to do? If we can't do that, then none of these other things are possible, and so that's what we have to try to do.
We definitely need to respond to this crisis with everything we have. We've long called for it to be declared a national public health emergency. And what we know is the approach that has been taken for decades.
And what were we just talking
simply
about,
doesn't
BP?
work. The approach
Making
of
sure
arresting
money goes
someone,
to
putting them
mental
through the
health
criminal justice
services,
system, putting them in
which
jail,
treats the
does not
root
make communities
problem
safer,
of
and it doesn't help
addiction.
people.
Yep.
So we have been saying, and I believe very firmly,
As
we
it
need
is-
to
as it
provide
stands right
healthcare
now,
responses to people
I could
that are
go to
dealing with
CAMH,
addiction.
the big
We need to make
mental
sure we are
health
doing everything we can
center
to
here in
secure a
Canada,
safe
guys,
supply.
in
We
the
need
heart
to
of
look
Toronto.
at the
I
evidence
could go there,
and say
but if I have
really
an
clearly,
addiction problem,
if there
they're
is
not
any
going to
step
treat
we
me.
can take that will
Nope.
save lives, we've got to take it.
So there's a
There's
lot
so
to
many
do, but does the
people that
political will
lost their
exist to do it?
Why?
exactly
That
the
should be the
question. Is there
question
political
for
will?
federal
We
and
all-
provincial
there doesn't seem
representatives.
to be because
Why
we
are
need a
these
national
people not
supply
getting treatment
program.
when they go to
We
these
wanted it
places?
before
Mental
Parliament
and,
dissolved,
like, it
and
may
here
also
we
be
are,
a
and
physical
lives will be
issue,
lost
but
in
it
my
is
riding of Toronto
absolutely a
Centre,
mental health
probably
issue.
today because
All
of
right,
it.
Ms. Paul, I have to wrap you there.
Yeah, I'm not saying there aren't physical elements to addiction, but the primary cause of addiction
Mr. O'Toole, this round to you.
is
Starting
usually there's
with
something
Mr.
there
Trudeau.
to cause them to
During
want
the
to go to
pandemic,
the bottle
Canadians
or
watched in
the
horror
sauce,
the
a bottle of
suffering
pills,
of their
whatever.
most vulnerable
Pink
and
Hollows right,
frail
safe
loved
injection
ones
sites
in
are not a
long-term
solution.
care.
No.
What if
They're
tomorrow
not.
you had to place a
They're
family
Band-Aid,
member in a long-term care facility?
on a
Would you do it?
severed
Beginning with
arm.
You, Mr. Trudeau, Mr. O'Toole, Mr. Blanchette, you may jump in.
Tomorrow is my mom's 73rd birthday, so that is certainly something we're reflecting on, but she's doing wonderfully right now. We won't have to make that decision right now. Don't worry.
Fuck you.
The reality is we've heard from seniors across this
Way to
country.
use
who've
your
been,
mom as a
tremendously
political
worried because of this
cudgel.
pandemic, and family members worried about that. We know
Oh,
that
nothing is
conditions
sacred to this guy.
of
He will
work
use
for
anything
the
and
people who are in those long-term care homes are often dictating the conditions
And what
of
about
care
me
for
not being
seniors,
able
which
to
is why
do
we propose to
anything
to
because I don't have a
hire
passport
50,000 new
that I would
personal
refuse to show
support
my
workers,
papers,
working with the provinces with the money for that. Also,
that they violate the
increasing
PIPA
minimum
Act
salary
in
to
Canada
$25 an hour
for people who are
who
not
care
medical
for our
custodians
elders
to
and most
demand
vulnerable.
my
So
medical
if you had to put
information.
mom in
Happens.
long-term care, you would do it?
I would make sure that, yes, that they are people who are properly well cared and that they're
Oh,
enough
please.
proportionate.
Mr.
And
O'Toole.
that's where we will
Please.
work with the provinces to deliver
You
exactly
would
that.
put
because
your
we put
mom
Thank
real
in like
money
a
Thank you, Mr.
golden.
Trudeau, Mr.
like,
O'Toole.
This is where we need
No, he wouldn't. He would
best.
hire
long-term
two
care
new
for the
nurses.
CFSLD in Quebec.
That's true.
We're going to have a $3 billion fund that the provinces
You
can
would
draw
have
on
a
for
private
infrastructure
nurse.
upgrades to long-term
Which
care.
I might
That's in
add is
addition
taking
to our
money
record
directly from the people who
almost
paid
$60
into the
billion
system
commitment over
for
10
their
years
own
to the
retirement
public
in these
healthcare
facilities
system.
that are
Universal
being
access
abused
with no
Yep.
conditions.
under
We
his
need
watch.
to partner with the provinces, not create fights.
Don't
And
give me that
long-term care,
shit, you
learning
fucking
from the
feckless
gaps
piece
in
of
the first part of
shit.
this pandemic is something we need.
And I have to address.
Would you put a loved one in long-term care
Absolutely.
tomorrow,
I have
Mr.
a
O'Toole?
grandmother.
Yeah, BG, and I don't drink that often, so.
But I have to touch on what
I,
Mr. Trudeau
I
said
don't drink this
about the recovery.
heavily.
We
like,
have to
I
get through
drink
the
a cup.
pandemic first.
Like
Why did
when
you
I
not
drink,
have that
I
approach
drink
to the
like
election,
maybe
Mr.
2
Trudeau? We're in the
ciders,
fourth
and I've
wave.
probably had the
Everything in the recovery
equivalent
relates to getting out of the
like
pandemic first.
4 or 5 shots of
Mr. Blanchet, I'm going to let
and
Mr.
I'm
Blanchet
probably
in.
about to pour
4
another
minutes
one.
more than
I have
So now
a
I think
shot
it's enough.
every
The debate is almost
2-3
over.
months.
Some
Just a little
dads
taste of
and
some
moms
scotch,
don't
and then that's
have to
it. I don't
worry.
drink.
They will have
I
the
used to
money,
drink
of
like a
course.
fish when I was younger,
Some
because
do.
going out
In
partying
order
after a
to
long
give
day in the
them
restaurant or
care,
in advertising or
need,
whatever, you go
the
out with your
care
friends
they
and have a
deserve.
couple drinks and
Those
have a good
responsible
time.
for
But
those
I
cares,
just don't drink anymore.
provinces and Quebec should have without conditions.
Not that I should
because
be.
it
I
is
mean,
their
with my
responsibility,
situation, I
their
shouldn't be
knowledge,
indulging
their
in too many
expertise, the
luxuries.
resources required. When the army came in Quebec, they arrived a week afterward.
Select a boy when
What
Trudeau
did they
couldn't
say?
be any more of a
They
prick.
did not say
He goes
Quebec is
lower.
not good enough to take care of its seniors.
What's the
They
saying?
said
When they go
they
low,
lacked
we go
resources.
even
They
lower.
lacked the money
Thank you,
which was
Mr.
kept by
Blanchet.
the federal
Leaders,
government.
we are
Directly-
starting to get
directly
at. We're
respond
running out of
to-
time. I am sorry, Mr. Trudeau. You've had the most time
Canadians
tonight. I'm
did
sorry,
the right
Mr. Trudeau.
things
We
and
are
got
now
through this
moving on
pandemic.
Now,
to our final journalist
that I
of
can
the
understand.
night. I am welcoming
If somebody
Evan
is the
Solomon
incumbent,
from CTV News.
they
He's gonna be
need time to
putting
respond
questions
to
you on
accusations and blah, blah,
COVID
blah, blah, blah.
recovery,
That I
starting
can
with
get
Mr.
on
Singh.
board with.
Hey, Evan.
Hi,
The incumbent
Shachi, and
should
hi,
have
leaders.
more
Good to
time than
see
everybody
all of you.
else.
Mr. Singh, I'll start with you, sir. Your pandemic recovery plan is uncosted. You have no plan to balance
I don't
the
know this
books,
guy.
but you promised to pay for your expensive promises.
I
new
don't
programs
watch
like universal
CTV. I
basic care
read
with
some of their
taxing
articles,
the
but I don't
super
watch
rich and
them.
taxing corporations. What specifically would you do to create the 1 million jobs you're promising and make sure Canada stays competitive?
Create more government jobs. I know.
That's not going to put the burden back on the
Do
same
the same
people that
thing
have
Trudeau
struggled.
did
We're the only ones
to inflate
on
his
this
own
debate table now. can say
employment
clearly,
numbers.
We would tax.
Hey, look, we created
billionaires. We would make sure
200,000
companies
new
like
government
Amazon
jobs.
Start paying their fair
And you know
share
what? They'll
so we can
probably
invest
have
in those new
another
jobs, so we can invest in people.
couple
Like to Mr.
100,000
Trudeau
coming
and
up
Mr.
with the
O'Toole,
fact that they're going to
they are
need
gonna
people
put
to
the burden
police
back on you. They've
vaccination
already started.
passports.
Mr. Trudeau has already started by cutting the CRE, cutting help to people.
Vax
What new
police.
I
programs,
believe
sir, specifically?
Well, I believe
coming.
in making sure we invest
Coming.
in pharmacare, we invest in dental care, we invest in retrofitting homes and buildings. In doing this, we're going to lower the cost of living, help people save money, but also create
Ain't
jobs by
wrong.
investing in
How are you going to
the
lower the
future
cost
economy,
of
the
living
economy
if
of the
you,
future.
the homes?
All right,
Okay.
Mr. Trudeau, to you.
We're gonna
Only
we're
4
gonna
months ago,
put
you
more money
released
into these
a
homes to
budget that
increase
was
their
billed as
value,
a
but we're gonna make them
pandemic
more
recovery
cost efficient
program,
somehow.
a plan that had
We're gonna spend
$101
more of your
billion
money,
of new
but make
spending.
things
Since then, COVID
more
numbers are up,
affordable
growth numbers
somehow.
are down. Now you got a new plan that adds $78 billion of new spending, essentially rendering your last budget out of date. How do Canadians trust that these new massive spending promises will not just keep growing in another few months? And what do you say to the next generation who say, how are we going to pay for this?
You
First
can't,
of all, I made a
and
promise
fuck
during
you.
this pandemic to have people's backs. Every time I came out of my house
Have people's
early on in the
backs.
pandemic
You've had
to talk
people's
directly to
backs?
Canadians, I told them
got it.
I can't drink right now.
Exactly what we've done, and it wasn't just being there for
I
people
want to.
because
I
we're
can't take
nice,
another
although of
drink
course
right
we
now.
are.
I need to let it
was
sit.
being there because that is the best way to ensure a strong recovery. Now, yes, our budget showed our ambition for this country, including the
Recovery?
$10
How about
that
you
Mr.
just
O'Toole is
stop?
planning on ripping up. But
You're the
it also
problem.
shows a responsible fiscal track.
Your rules and
even with
regulations and
our
the
fully costed platform that is even more ambitious on the fight against
premiers.
climate change, on housing, on support for people.
Stop.
The
Open up.
debt
Go
of
back
our
to
country
normal.
as
We're
proportion of
fine.
The
believe it's
GDP
important to
continues
Unless
to
you
decrease.
Yes or no?
admit
Is
that
it
the
important to have a plan
vaccines
to balance
do
your budget
nothing.
because you don't have one? Yes
It
or
is
no?
important to stay
The
fiscally
education
responsible, and that's what we're
programs
doing.
that we've
Our
rolled
debt
out about
continues to
hygiene
decrease
Okay, we
as
gotta
a
and
move
result of
on.
such,
GDP.
We gotta
and
move on.
social
Ms. Paul,
distancing
to
and
you
such
now.
do
We
nothing
have not been
and
clear if you
masking
support
does
the
nothing.
need for vaccine vaccine passports or mandatory
Oh, here we
vaccines
go.
for federal workers or even mandatory vaccines for your own candidates. Given that the fourth wave is really a pandemic of the unvaccinated and threatening to overwhelm many healthcare systems, how do you justify not supporting
Is that
the
why a
very
whole bunch
measures
of
that have
people in
proven to
hospital
be
are
most
vaccinated?
effective at increasing vaccination?
And is that why half of the
We just filmed a
nursing
video
staff
today
in both
asking
Canada
everyone
and the
to get
United States
vaccinated.
are
We have
refusing
been
vaccinations
unequivocal in our support for
under threat
vaccinations.
of being fired?
Mandatory vaccinations and vaccine
yes.
passports.
Well, again, this is just this is again where policy gets put aside for partisan advantage, because there is everyone on this stage understands that everyone who can be vaccinated should be vaccinated. We need to encourage people to do it. Vaccine saves lives.
Give them the
And
choice.
Every single person on the stage has also said that, of course, there are going to be people who are not able to get vaccinated for certain reasons, and we have to reasonably accommodate them. We
And what
will
about people who
always be
just don't
guided
want
by
it?
the science. We will never put partisan concerns ahead of public health.
Mr. O'Toole.
Or don't need it because they have
promised a
natural
$60
immunities
billion
that work
increase in
better,
healthcare transfers over the next
apparently,
10 years, but
according to the current
independent
science,
parliamentary budget officer, it's actually only
than the vaccinations themselves.
$3.6 billion
No,
for
no
the
comment.
next 5
Didn't
years,
think
which is
so.
not much different than the status quo. But you also support private
dog.
public
What's up,
synergies,
my
in your
dude?
words. Can you specify here tonight exactly what kinds of private healthcare innovations you want to see more of? And if a province introduces more private healthcare, would you enforce the Canada Health Act by holding back any of your promised funding?
I 100% support our public and universal system. I've said it's paramount.
Yeah.
And after
Yeah.
COVID-19, we need to rebuild it. So we have the most substantive plan to do that. 6% increase per year, stable, predictable, without conditions.
COVID has nothing to do
with
with
our
it.
provinces. We will respect them running and putting priorities to get wait times down, to give more choice, for universal public access. That's what we need. On top of that, Evan, we have a substantial commitment in mental health and treatment for addiction. There are going to be lingering aspects from this pandemic. That
Oh,
will
we lost your
require
camera.
addiction.
Trying to
The
be.
provinces are in charge of their system.
Wait,
we
whose
will
camera?
respect that.
Your camera.
Public and
Oh.
universal elements need to be at the core of our system.
might have knocked
and our
something.
investment.
Is it
Can still
back?
hear you.
Save it and give
Can still
relief
hear
to
you.
Is it back?
front lines like our
Nope.
nurses,
Okay.
physicians. Mr. Trudeau
Hold
doesn't
on.
hire those people.
Okay,
All
just
right,
for time.
all right, we got to wrap you, Mr. O'Toole.
Mr. Blanchet, Quebecers relied on the federal government for life-saving vaccines and key programs like the
Exactly,
SURE.
Select
And
the
as
boy.
you mentioned, the Canadian Armed Forces came in to save people in long-term care homes in the province
I
of Quebec. Some believe
will
this
give
crisis
credit where
has
credit's
enforced
due,
the argument for a strong
and
federation
making
that
them
undermines the
widely
fundamental
available
argument
to
of
people who
separatism.
want to
Given
take
that,
the
if federal
Fauci-ouchie.
government, say,
Go
gives
ahead.
$1 billion for
Go
long-term
ahead.
care homes,
Your body,
Quebec
your
fails
choice.
to
Wow.
protect
We've
Why should
established
they
that
not
it's
also inform,
not
enforce
a polio
national
epidemic.
standards?
There you go.
Still not.
We've established it's not
All
horrible.
those brilliant
Randomly
people
turned
all
off
over the place and
like
all
it
over Canada.
randomly
What
toggled
a
itself
Canadian
off.
can do that a Quebecer cannot
But
do.
if you don't want
In
it,
what
there shouldn't be a
way
gun at your head.
whatsoever
There shouldn't
would
be a threat of
Canadian
losing
norm
your
be
job
any
or
better than a Quebec
losing
norm? I don't see
your
that.
rights
And I'm not,
under the
you know,
Charter
I
of
don't have
Rights
this
and
complex. I don't
Freedoms
feel that
and under
I'm any
PIPA
a lesser person than
here
a
in
Canadian
Canada.
I'm
because I'm a
asking about enforcing
Quebecer.
national standard. If you pay for something,
so
should
I'm
you be able to
against
enforce it?
national norms or standards. And I would say that the Premier Legault of Quebec today said, no one is to be entirely trusted in this group of people. Some are worse than others. I think they recognize themselves. But even those who are a little bit less terrible need a watchdog because they're not entitled to a majority government. So if Quebecers want, I will lead the watchdogs.
Okay, this is the open debate section.
I don't trust you
And
to
I'll start
do
with you, Mr.
dick
O'Toole,
all.
but everyone please jump in, not all at once. The pandemic recovery is about the future path of Canada. And all of the leaders
Look at
here
Blanchet
tonight
like the
have
Joker.
made
He's
promises
taking
that
everybody's
require
masks
historic
off,
levels of spending.
exposing
But
them a
as you all
little
know,
bit,
politics
but
is
he's
about
not a
hard
leader.
choices. With some Canadians still in real need of support and other industries experiencing real labor shortages, what specific programs will stay and what will go in the next year, and who will pay for all of this? Mr. O'Toole.
That's a great question, Evan, because we didn't see the government adapt to the changing crisis. What we supported, and we all worked together. The
Politicians
wage
think we are
subsidy, the CERB,
retards.
needed to be adapted as there were labor shortages. in
Yeah,
Quebec,
well,
as
maybe
we
not
can't
even
find
that
enough
high. They
people for
think we're just
restaurants and
bank
service
accounts.
industries. We need to target
Give
the
them
highly
money.
impacted sectors. That's what our plan, Canada's recovery plan,
Jesus,
does.
my phone case is, like,
Get those
disintegrating in my
service,
hand.
Tourism, restaurants back on their feet, get people working, and with keeping cases low, we can then wind down the other programs because we need to focus on work.
Gross
We have a
goes
job
dog.
boost
Come on,
that will
man.
actually
Come on,
incentivize the hiring of people that have
Let
been out of
Mr.
work
Singh in,
for
Mr.
10 months or more.
Mr. O'Toole, let Mr. Singh in.
Mr. O'Toole and Mr. Trudeau are jumping over each other about who was going to cut help to people first. I don't agree with that approach. I don't think it makes sense to say, oh, I'm going to have people's back
but I'm going to cut as quickly as I
doubling
can.
the Canada
I'm going to cut the
workers'
help to
benefit, Mr.
people
Singh.
who need it as
Doubling
much as they can. We're the only party right here clearly is going to say to you, you're not going to have to pay more. We're not going to cut any programs. We're going to ask the
Mr. Singh,
44.
we're giving
You're
you
gonna
Canadians
go
a
money
couple
tree
of
goes
dollars.
Let
burn.
Mr. O'Toole
Which is
respond.
going to
billionaires
drive
pay their
value
fair
down.
share.
I think
That's
everyone
what
can
we're
respond
Therefore,
to that because
yeah,
this
you
is
are
the
gonna make
second
people
time
pay
that
more.
Mr. Singh has said we're the only party where, you know, just us. Mr. Singh,
maybe
you know
you're
that
being
that's...
Hold on, Mr.
No,
Singh.
unless you're
right.
trying to ghost me, you know that
you're
we
right, you're right.
also... Okay.
Ghost
So, yes.
you?
Okay.
Two of
Thank
us.
you. Thank
You're right,
you.
you're
All right, Mr. Trudeau, you're trying to get in.
Mr. Singh continues
Ghost
to pretend that
you?
it makes no difference whether there is a progressive government or a
Really?
conservative, or progressive government or
progressive
a
conservative.
conservative government. We know that it makes a huge
By
difference
the
to
way, they
families
should be
whether
wearing
they
a
have
mask.
$10 a day childcare,
Well
whether
done,
they have
man.
a government that has their back, a government that has a plan to move beyond the Harper targets on fighting climate change. Now, Mr. Singh may feel that for the NDP it makes no difference who forms government. I know for Canadian families,
Mr.
it makes a
Trudeau.
Mr.
huge
Blanchet, you
difference
haven't
that the
you
government
haven't been
be
in yet.
progressive.
Mr.
How does
Blanchet.
translate subvention salariale?
Wage subsidy.
Wage subsidy. Did any of you three guys refund the wage subsidy that you received?
We
Up
stopped
to
it
about
now.
$3 million. That would be something, at least for the principal. After that,
We've been
there's
supporting
an
workers.
important issue, labor shortage. They are promising jobs. They should be promising workers.
Yes.
We need people to work. And that raises the question of productivity. This is the most important issue, and some programs should be turned toward that issue.
Mr. O'Toole.
In this pandemic,
Bring back
election,
manufacturing.
Mr. Trudeau called after everyone asked him not to. He says he doesn't worry about monetary policy and inflation.
Yep, he
now
did
he's
say
saying
that.
he doesn't ever intend to balance the budget. He's spending $424 million a day more than Canada's
But what
bringing
program?
in.
The question was,
We
what
need-
programs will stay?
We
and
need
what
to
will
wind
go?
down the
program that we
support
need.
programs in a
I can
fair
respond
way
to that directly.
and get the country working
We
again.
have got to remember.
Thank you.
Have got to
Last
remember the-
last
I'm gonna
minute
fight
of
for
play,
my time.
leaders.
I'm
Last
gonna
minute of
do
play.
that. I
Ms.
see the
Paul,
board.
5
Thank
seconds
you
to
so
you.
much.
I'm coming to you, Ms. Paul.
Thank you. We have got to remember the pandemic is not over, and all over this country, people
It
still
never
need the benefits.
was.
They should be
Shut
there
up.
until the pandemic is over. And to the people of Canada, it is unfortunate we are in this election. You can see that there is a lot of work left to do. We need to get back to doing it in a more
Okay,
cooperative
thank
way.
you, Ms.
What-
Paul.
one of the
Mr. Singh,
specific
I see you,
programs-
Mr. Trudeau. Mr.
One of the
Singh.
specific programs, we demanded 22 times in Parliament for Mr. Trudeau to expand was paid sick leave. Because in this pandemic, people had to make the impossible choice going into work sick.
I thought
or
you
not
didn't
being
want to
able
increase people's
because they
costs for
couldn't Pay their
things.
bills. 22
But
times.
having to
over
pay
18
people who
months,
aren't
we
working?
demanded an
Don't you
expansion.
get it,
and Mr.
Functional?
Trudeau
The
said no to
money's
you
just supposed to
and said no to your
magic.
family.
Last word to you on this, Mr.
Expanding
Trudeau.
sick leave to 10 days
Oh,
of paid sick leave for
right.
federal
In the
Wait for
election.
magic fairy
in the
wands.
election, and this is
22 times
important,
of asking for
you
it.
have seen tonight the extreme differences between the perspectives
Okay,
of these parties.
leaders?
We need Canadians to make the right choice
Leaders,
so we
that
can
is
move
it.
forward together.
We're out of time. Evan, thank you. Leaders, thank you for your participation tonight. That's it for the English language leaders debate. Voting day is September 20th. Get your ballots. Make sure you're registered. On behalf of the Leaders Debate Consortium, I want to thank the crew, the producers, everyone who made this happen. I'm Shachi Curl. Good night.
Good night, very much. Good night.
Chachi Curl? Weird name. Okay. Wow, BP, that was an experience.
That was,
Rolling my eyes.
oh my lord, that was special. That was, if that was supposed to reassure me as to the choices I have in my leaders, well, let me tell you, it really did not.
I don't remember who said it to me. Somebody who is a conservative, who leans more conservative. Oh, what's that? Who? What? Excuse me. It's coming out of nowhere.
No,
They lean conservative, but they said to me, Maxime could do more if he just didn't say anything. And I think it's right. He was right. I didn't believe him at the time, but from what I see on the stage there, or saw on the stage, it made me even less confident in perhaps voting for O'Toole. I obviously was not going to be voting for Greens or NDP.
Mm-hmm.
And given their most recent track record, was not going to be voting Liberal at all.
Right.
So yeah, my confidence with this debate is even more shot than it was before. I'd like to have seen O'Toole come out a little bit stronger, and maybe even, and I hate to say this because he's my guy, but maybe even steal some talking points and some cojones from Maxime, and say, we're going to directly attack Chinese investment here. We are directly going to get involved in XYZ and be a little bit more robust.
Well, the shitty part was that the moderator wouldn't even let it was like him and Blanchette she didn't want to hear them. And she
anybody right of center didn't.
I noticed she took every opportunity to cut O'Toole and Blanchette off much quicker than she did Trudeau or Singh or Paul.
Yeah.
And it was so telling. And she had no moderatory, I don't even think that's a word. She had no, composure as a moderator. She didn't have the stern, calm voice that a moderator should have. She had to yell. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
She had to literally
It came
yell.
off like a mom yelling at children.
Yeah.
And that's not based on her gender, because we've had in Western politics, we've had female moderators who can, and pardon the euphemism, but slam her dick down on the table and say, enough.
Mm-hmm.
This is my show. I get to moderate. And she just didn't have that presence, that gravitas. And I think part of the problem was, unlike the American debates, they couldn't control the mics. There should be kill switches for each mic. If she needs to shut somebody up, she just doesn't have to say anything. Says, thank you, click.
Mm-hmm.
And stop, and shuts off their mic. And that being said, stop having journalists.
Yeah.
Stop using fucking journalists. You know who you get? You get the professor of political sciences from the University of Toronto, or the University of Alberta. You get somebody who's has a sense of authority, probably from the education sector or something. Sure, they might lean a little bit more to the left. Doesn't matter. But they are used to dealing with people who act like children in political debate.
Yeah.
Not journalists who are hyper partisan.
Yeah.
And who have all-time lows, people in public trust. That's not who you get to run your debates.
No, the minute you introduce journalists into the mix for a debate, the minute you get this, and you can bet that with the journalist questions especially, that the candidates got a chance to look at them before the debate. And that's, honestly, I don't think you should be able to do that.
Yeah. And I just mentioned to Costin, he says he wants to vote PPC because he likes the party, but the candidate, his local representative candidate, terrible.
Yeah.
And I will beat this drum because this is how our political system works. Look at your local candidate. Don't vote party. I know. It's something that even I took many, many years to sort of grasp. Vote for your local representative because they will have your area's best interests at heart when they do go to Parliament. And the bigger issues, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to suck it up because you don't always get what you want. But sometimes you get what you need from your local candidate.
Yeah.
That's why most of my life, yes, I have voted Liberal. I hated the party, but my local representative was head and shoulders above the opposition in the given ridings that I'd lived in various places and times in my life. So you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
How you feeling?
I'm very, 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 very drunk.
You're welcome, Picala. Thank you, Selecta. A journalist moderating a debate is like dirt and water.
Yeah.
Nobody's getting clean. All you're getting is mud.
Exactly.
Not so much academics, BG, but like, you know, professors, people who deal with. They're not necessarily academics. Like, sure, they might teach, but these are people who analyze, who crunch numbers, who look at policies and deconstruct them. And I think that they would be better at the debate because they would see through the bullshit. You don't, obviously you don't do what that female reporter did and get involved in the conversation. You ask your question. If they don't answer or are veering off topic, you can say, hey, that wasn't the question. Please answer the question.
Yeah,
but
no.
you need somebody who...
She was just like, oh, really? You know, like, you know, she got snarky with them. That was unnecessary.
I wouldn't be surprised if she was a close personal friend of the Trudeaus.
Well, we've been live for
almost 3
hours. So thank you guys for watching, and you guys have gotten a chance, my American friends, you've gotten a chance to take a look,
get a taste
at the wonderful shenanigans and bullshit that Canadian politics has to offer. So I hope you enjoyed it.
And our various interpretations of such people and policies.
And to my Canadian friends, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry that's what we have to fucking choose.
Yeah, remember, we've got 10 days left to go to the polls. I don't want to force anybody or demand that you go to the polls and do your civic duty, but please consider doing your civic duty.
Yeah.
It means a lot, even though an individual vote doesn't. It means a lot knowing that people care enough to go to the polls. To me, personally.
Yeah.
Voter turnout has been at all-time lows. Confidence in these people has been at all-time lows. And abstaining your vote does say something, but it also doesn't say something. You know, there's other things you can be said with your vote. And thanks for having and hosting this, and it was a good time.
Yeah, it was a good time. And on that note, guys, thanks for watching. You can catch the coffee stream tomorrow at noon Eastern, and I will see everybody then. Thank you all. I'm going to go have a shower and go to bed because I'm super wasted.
At least something positive came out of this debate.
Right? All right.
Good night, all.
Have a good night, guys.
Take coffee. Boot it.